Imagine transforming your entire life in just 1 week. Sounds impossible, right? Well, these 50 small habits rooted in Stoic philosophy did exactly that for me. Each one brought clarity, control, and power to my daily routine. Stick around till the end because even the smallest habit might just be the game changer you're looking for. Let's dive in. Number 1. Use the 2-minute rule for quick tasks. Alright, let's talk about the 2-minute rule. This one's pretty simple on the surface but has the potential to completely transform how you handle all those little things that tend to pile up. You know what I mean, those tiny tasks that take up mental space but never seem to get done. The trick here is to flip your thinking on them. Instead of letting them linger, the 2-minute rule says if something can be done in 2 minutes or less, do it right now. Sounds easy, right? But here's the thing, most of us underestimate just how much these small tasks add up. You think, I'll do that later, but later turns into never, or worse, it turns into a mountain of small things that suddenly feels like too much. It's like this sneaky backlog that builds up in the background without you even realizing it. The beauty of the 2-minute rule is that it stops the pileup before it even starts. You take care of stuff in real time, and it never has the chance to haunt you. Now, when you hear 2 minutes, it might sound ridiculously short. What can you even accomplish in 2 minutes? But the truth is, quite a lot. Responding to a quick email, sending a text, jotting down a note, or putting that dirty dish in the sink, these are the kind of tasks we push aside because they seem too small to matter. But when you think about it, small things can actually clog up your productivity in a major way. They take up mental energy, whether you're aware of it or not. So if you can knock them out in 2 minutes or less, why not just get them out of the way? Here's where the magic happens. Once you start practicing the 2-minute rule, it actually has this ripple effect. When you handle these small tasks as they come, you get a little burst of satisfaction. A tiny win, but a win nonetheless. And that momentum? It starts to build. The more you do it, the more you realize how much smoother your day flows. Plus, these little bits of productivity start trickling into other areas of your life. Suddenly, that bigger task you've been avoiding doesn't seem quite as overwhelming because you're used to the habit of handling things right when they appear. There's also a bit of psychology behind this. Your brain loves finishing things. That little hit of dopamine you get from checking something off your list? It feels good. So, the more you apply the 2-minute rule, the more you're training your brain to associate quick action with reward. And once your brain starts craving that reward, it's much easier to stay on top of things. But here's a key point, don't overthink it. The moment you start debating whether something falls under the 2-minute rule is the moment you lose the benefit. Keep it simple. If you even suspect it can be done in 2 minutes, just dive in. No hesitation, no mental back and forth. In the end, the 2-minute rule isn't just about getting stuff done. It's about creating a mindset where you're not weighed down by the little things. You free up mental space, which leaves you feeling lighter, more in control, and oddly enough, more ambitious without that overwhelming stress that tends to creep in. All by focusing on what can be done in the here and now, with zero procrastination. Number 2, embrace the 80-20 rule in both work and rest. Let's talk about the 80-20 rule. Maybe you've heard it called the Pareto principle, but let's leave the fancy names aside for now and break this down into something you can actually use. Whether it's in your work or your rest, the idea is super simple. 80% of your results usually come from just 20% of your efforts. So why not use that to your advantage? You don't need to go full throttle on everything to make a difference, especially if you're someone who craves achievement but also has a bit of that laid-back, lazy streak in you. So, how does this rule actually work in real life? Here's the trick, you don't need to pour your energy into everything. If you're spending hours tweaking things that barely move the needle, you're wasting precious time. It's about picking the few things that will give you the biggest return, focusing hard on those, and letting the small stuff slide, because let's be real, no one can give 100% all the time. That's exhausting and, frankly, kind of overrated. Instead of trying to do it all, ask yourself, what are the key things I need to do to make the most progress? What can I work on for just a short burst that will really push things forward? Here's where the 80-20 rule gets interesting, because it's not just about working smarter, it's about resting smarter, too. People usually think productivity is all about doing more, but that's only half the game. The other half? Knowing when to stop. When you take a break, don't just zone out for the sake of it. Rest in a way that actually recharges you. That 20% of quality downtime can give you 80% of your energy back. It's like hacking your own relaxation. Maybe a 15-minute power nap is enough to reboot your brain, while mindlessly scrolling for hours makes you feel more drained. So, it's not about being lazy, it's about being strategic. You can rest without guilt if you know you're resting in a way that helps you bounce back stronger. Balancing ambition with laziness might sound like an oxymoron, but it's totally possible once you figure out your sweet spot. Picture it like this: instead of running a marathon at full speed, you're sprinting for short bursts. You'll get to the finish line faster and with a lot less effort, leaving time to chill in between. It's about learning to optimize your energy, to stretch that minimal effort for maximum results, both in work and in rest. You'll feel more satisfied because you're doing the important stuff well and not stressing about the rest. Think of this whole 80-20 thing as your permission slip to stop overcomplicating everything. There's freedom in realizing you don't need to be constantly productive to be successful. In fact, by applying this principle, you're working with your natural tendencies instead of fighting against them. So, embrace the laziness, just make sure it's the intentional kind. When you zoom in on the things that matter and recharge in a way that fuels your ambition, you'll find that sweet spot where you're doing less but achieving more. Number 3, limit distractions and multitasking. Let's talk about distractions and multitasking, the sneaky enemies of productivity. They might seem harmless, maybe even helpful at times, but here's the deal: they're messing with your focus in ways you might not even realize. It's like trying to pour water into a cup while waving your arms around. Sure, some water might land in the cup, but most of it spills everywhere. The end result? A mess, and very little progress. Distractions are everywhere these days. It's not just about that constant buzzing phone, though that certainly doesn't help. It's also those little things we don't notice at first: random thoughts, emails popping up, even the environment around us. You sit down to work, and suddenly, everything seems more interesting than what you're supposed to be doing. The pile of laundry looks inviting. The YouTube tab, promising a 5-minute video that somehow turns into an hour-long binge. What's the harm, right? Well, the problem is that each time you give into one of these distractions, your brain has to reset itself. There's a cost to switching gears, and it's higher than you might think. You're not just losing a few seconds to check your messages or scroll through a social media feed, you're also draining your energy and focus. You might think, I can handle it. Multitasking is my superpower. But here's the catch: multitasking doesn't work the way we think it does. When you multitask, you're not really doing multiple things at once. Your brain is actually bouncing back and forth between tasks. And every time it switches, it gets a little slower, a little more tired. Imagine a car constantly stopping and starting. Eventually, the engine wears out. That's your brain when you're juggling too many things at once. You think you're saving time, but in reality, you're stretching out tasks and making mistakes you wouldn't if you gave each one your full attention. The truth is, multitasking makes us feel busy, but it rarely makes us productive. It creates the illusion that we're doing a lot, when in fact, we're barely scratching the surface of what we could accomplish. You're typing an email while half listening to a podcast, and suddenly, you realize neither is really getting your full focus. You have to go back, reread the email, rewind the podcast. It's like taking 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So, what's the solution? Well, it starts with being honest about what's pulling you off track. You don't have to eliminate every distraction forever, that's unrealistic. But you can create pockets of time where distractions are minimized, where you're giving one task your all. Turn off notifications for a bit, close unnecessary tabs, and make a deal with yourself. For the next 30 minutes, I'm focusing on just this one thing. You might be amazed at how much faster and better you can work when your brain isn't constantly switching lanes. And if you're someone who finds focus hard, start small. Set a timer for 10 or 15 minutes. Give yourself permission to be fully engaged for just that short amount of time. You'll probably find that once you get into it, you can go longer. It's like easing into cold water, you just need to take the plunge, and before you know it, you're swimming. No distractions, no multitasking. Just flow. The more you practice limiting distractions and avoiding multitasking, the easier it gets. You'll start to see the benefits: less stress, more creativity, and, most importantly, more actual progress. Because, let's face it, the goal isn't to feel busy. It's to get things done. Number 4, break large tasks into manageable chunks. Alright, let's get real for a second. We've all been there, staring down a huge task, feeling completely paralyzed. It's like this giant looming cloud that hovers over you, getting heavier and more intimidating the longer you let it sit. You know it needs to get done, and you probably even want to get it done, but the size of it? Ugh, overwhelming. And honestly, that's enough to make anyone feel lazy, even if you've got the best intentions in the world. So, what do you do when faced with a massive, overwhelming task? You break it down into manageable chunks. That's it. Simple, right? But it's not just about chopping up a big job into smaller pieces. It's about tricking your brain a little, turning what seems impossible into something so small, so bite-sized, that it feels doable. Here's the thing, your brain hates big, undefined goals. They feel vague, uncertain, and honestly kind of scary. But small tasks? Your brain loves those. It sees a small task, and it says, yeah, I can handle that. It's a psychological trick, really. When you break down something big into little, manageable steps, suddenly, you don't feel so stuck. And the best part? You start building momentum, bit by bit, without even realizing it. Let's talk about how this works. First, you need to take that massive task and figure out all the moving parts. What needs to happen first? What are the smaller things that, when combined, complete the larger picture? Break it all the way down. The smaller, the better. If something still feels too big, you're not done breaking it down yet. Think of it like this: the goal is to make each chunk so easy, it almost feels like you could knock it out without even thinking about it. And don't just stop at breaking things down. Give yourself little rewards along the way. Finished a chunk? Awesome. Take a breather, grab a snack, check your phone. Whatever makes you feel like you've earned it. These tiny rewards help keep you motivated because, let's face it, motivation can be fleeting when a big task is looming overhead. But when you reward yourself for completing the small stuff, you create a feedback loop. You feel good about getting things done, so you're more likely to keep going. There's also something to be said about the sense of control that comes with this approach. Large tasks can make you feel like you're at their mercy, but when you break them into chunks, suddenly, you're the one in control. You get to decide what happens next, and that alone can make a big difference in how you approach the task. It's empowering, honestly. You're not battling this huge beast of a project anymore, you're calmly handling one small thing at a time. Let's also acknowledge that energy fluctuates. Sometimes you're feeling sharp, ready to tackle the bigger chunks. Other times, you're tired, distracted, maybe even a little bit lazy. That's okay. When you've broken things down, you've got options. Not feeling up to a big step? No problem, tackle a smaller one. It all adds up in the end. So, the next time you're feeling stuck or overwhelmed, remember, it's not about doing the whole thing at once. It's about finding that first, small, manageable piece and starting there. Because once you start moving, no matter how tiny the steps, you'll be surprised at how quickly you start making real progress. That's how you outsmart the laziness. Little by little, chunk by chunk. Number 5, leverage automation and delegation. Let's face it, if you're ambitious but lazy, the idea of grinding through every little task is probably not your vibe. You want the big wins, but the tedious, repetitive stuff? Not so much. That's where the magic of automation and delegation comes in. These are your secret weapons. Seriously, you can get so much done without actually doing it all yourself, and that's the goal, right? First, let's talk about automation. We live in a world where technology can do so much of the heavy lifting for us. You've probably got access to tools that can handle things faster, more efficiently, and with way less effort than you ever could. Whether it's setting up automatic responses, reminders, or systems that streamline your workflow, automation is like having your own personal assistant who works 24/7. The best part? You don't have to pay them, and they never ask for a break. But here's the key with automation, you've got to be intentional about it. Don't go automating things just for the sake of it. That's how you end up with systems that don't make sense or that cause more stress than they're worth. Instead, think about the tasks that suck up your time but don't really need your hands-on attention. Can you set up an automatic process to handle them? Perfect. Get that in place, and suddenly, you're doing less, but getting the same, if not better, results. Then there's delegation, which is a whole other superpower. If automation is your silent partner, delegation is more like building your dream team. You don't have to do everything yourself. In fact, you shouldn't. That's not laziness, that's smart. Delegation isn't about dumping your work on someone else, it's about recognizing that other people are probably better at certain things than you are. And guess what? That frees you up to focus on the stuff you're actually good at, the things that move the needle on your ambitions. When you delegate, you're not saying, "I don't want to do this because I'm lazy." You're saying, "I have bigger things to focus on." And that's the truth. It's about playing to your strengths while letting others handle the things that don't light you up. Plus, people love to feel useful, so you're actually giving someone else the opportunity to shine. Win-win. The trick to both automation and delegation is to find that balance where you can let go of the tasks that don't really need you, while still keeping control of the things that do. It's not about abandoning responsibility. You're still the captain of the ship, but you've got an awesome crew, or a killer autopilot system, helping steer it. What's even better is the mental space this creates. When you've delegated the busy work and automated the routine tasks, your brain is free to focus on the bigger picture. You get to spend more time dreaming, strategizing, and chasing the ambitious goals that really matter to you. You're not bogged down by every tiny detail, and that's a huge game changer. So if you're someone who's both ambitious and lazy, automation and delegation are like the ultimate cheat codes. They let you do more by doing less. That's not a contradiction, it's efficiency. You can hit your goals without getting caught up in the weeds, and let's be real, you're probably not into weeding anyway. Why pull weeds when you can plant seeds and watch them grow? That's the lazy person's secret to success. Number 6, reward yourself for completing tasks. Let's be real, sometimes, getting things done feels like pulling teeth. You know what you should do, but that doesn't make it any easier. This is where rewarding yourself comes in. It's like tricking your brain into thinking, hey, if I finish this, I'll get something good. And guess what? It works. Now, before you roll your eyes and think, okay, but I'm not a kid, I don't need a gold star, hear me out. Rewards aren't just for kids, they're for humans. We're wired to chase after things that make us feel good. Whether it's a snack, a break, or just that satisfying feeling of closing a to-do list, rewards can be a game changer when it comes to pushing through those lazy, sluggish moments. Think of your brain like a puppy. Stay with me here. Puppies need to be trained. You don't get them to sit by yelling sit over and over again, right? You've got to throw them a bone when they do it right. Otherwise, they'll just stare at you and probably keep bouncing around like nothing happened. Your brain is kind of the same. It responds way better to positive reinforcement than to guilt or pressure. So, why not make finishing tasks a little more enjoyable? Let's say you've got something you really don't want to do. Maybe it's boring, or just daunting. Whatever it is, pair it with a reward. It doesn't have to be anything extravagant. In fact, it shouldn't be. You want rewards that are simple, easy, and directly tied to the task. Like, if I finish this thing in the next hour, I'm going to take a 10-minute break and just chill. Boom. You've just set up a little incentive for yourself. But here's where it gets interesting. The more often you reward yourself, the more your brain starts to associate completing tasks with that feel-good hit. It becomes a cycle: do the thing, get the reward, feel good, repeat. Slowly but surely, you'll find yourself actually wanting to finish tasks because you know there's something enjoyable on the other side of it. What's important is that you actually follow through on the reward. You can't say, I'll reward myself with a break, and then keep working. Your brain will catch on, and soon enough, it'll stop caring about your promises. It's like telling that puppy it'll get a treat for sitting, but then never giving it the treat. Eventually, it'll stop sitting altogether. Another thing to remember is to scale your rewards based on the task. Knocked out a big project that you've been dreading for days? That deserves something a little more special. Finished a quick 10-minute task? Maybe just a stretch or a sip of your favorite drink. The key is to keep the reward proportional to the effort so it doesn't lose its magic. Here's a fun trick: stack your rewards for bigger motivation. Have a couple of things you need to get done? Create a reward system that builds as you complete more. After task 1, a quick break. After task 2, maybe you get a snack. Finish the whole list? Now you're talking. Time for something even better. And don't underestimate the power of the reward being as simple as the relief of finishing. Sometimes the reward is just knowing you did it, and you can finally relax. That's pretty satisfying in itself, right? But if that's not enough, there's no shame in sweetening the deal with a little something extra. At the end of the day, rewarding yourself is all about making the process of getting things done more enjoyable. You're ambitious, but maybe you don't always feel like pushing through. That's okay. Rewarding yourself isn't about bribing yourself into working, it's about creating a positive feedback loop where you associate success with feeling good. Because who doesn't want to feel good, right? So go ahead, set those mini goals, and don't forget to reward yourself when you knock them out. You've earned it. Number 7, embrace the power of good enough. Let's be honest, perfectionism is a trap. It's this sneaky little voice that convinces you that unless something is flawless, it's not worth doing. But here's the truth: striving for perfection? It's exhausting. And not just mentally, but physically too. It drains your energy, leaves you stuck in analysis paralysis, and eventually leads to getting absolutely nothing done. The solution? Embrace the power of good enough. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying you should settle for mediocrity or stop caring about quality. What I'm saying is that sometimes, aiming for good enough is actually the smartest move you can make. It frees you. It gets you out of your head and into action. Good enough means progress. It means things are moving, not stalling. When you're ambitious but also, let's say, not always brimming with motivation, good enough is your secret weapon. You don't need to burn yourself out trying to make everything immaculate. You just need to keep things moving forward, even if it's not the most polished or perfect outcome. Think about it. When has the pursuit of perfection ever done anything but slow you down? Here's the funny part. Most of the time, no one else is even going to notice the difference between something that's perfect and something that's simply done. Half of the pressure to make things perfect? It's self-imposed. You've got this internal critic that's way harsher than anyone else would ever be. People appreciate completion, not the hours you spent agonizing over tiny details. And once you start accepting that good enough is actually good enough, you start feeling lighter. More free. You'll start taking on more because suddenly, everything doesn't seem so massive. Let's talk about how this plays out in real life. You've got a task in front of you, and there's that temptation to keep tweaking it, refining every little aspect. But stop for a second and ask yourself, is this extra work really going to add significant value? Or is it just about scratching that itch for perfection? 9 times out of 10, the answer is, nope, it's not worth it. The extra 10%, the tiny details that you're obsessing over, they don't move the needle as much as you think. When you embrace good enough, you're also embracing efficiency. You're cutting out the fluff, getting to the point, and moving on to the next thing. And here's a cool little side effect, you actually start getting more done. More tasks finished. More projects off the ground. Because you're not constantly getting bogged down by trying to make every little thing pristine. You're done, it's good enough, and now you're on to the next thing. And let's not forget the mental freedom that comes with this mindset. There's this sense of relief when you realize you don't have to make everything perfect. You start to let go of all that unnecessary pressure you've been piling on yourself. You begin to feel more confident that what you're doing is enough. It might not be flawless, but it's done. And done is always better than perfect. In the end, embracing good enough isn't about lowering your standards. It's about being realistic. It's about focusing on what really matters and letting the rest go. It's about finding balance, working smarter, and recognizing that sometimes, good enough is more than enough. Number 8, use productive procrastination to make small progress. Let's talk about something you might already be really good at, procrastination. Now, hear me out, because I'm not here to shame you for putting things off. In fact, if you play your cards right, procrastination can actually work in your favor. It's all about shifting your mindset from feeling guilty about not doing the thing to doing something else that's still productive. Enter productive procrastination. Yeah, it sounds a little contradictory, but stay with me. Productive procrastination is a sneaky way to make progress without feeling like you're grinding away at the big, scary task that's looming over you. It's when you tell yourself, okay, I'm not ready to tackle that huge project right now, but what can I do that's small and still useful? It's not about avoiding work, it's about nudging yourself into doing different work. This way, you're still moving the needle, just not on the thing you're avoiding. And guess what? That's totally fine. Let's be real, getting started is often the hardest part. The bigger the task, the more you want to run in the opposite direction. It's like staring up at a mountain and thinking, there's no way I'm climbing that right now. But productive procrastination lets you hike the little hills first. Those small tasks, like organizing your thoughts, outlining a plan, or even cleaning up your workspace, can help ease you into the bigger challenge without actually diving in head first. You're tricking your brain into thinking, look, I'm still being productive. And slowly, momentum builds. Here's the beauty of it, small progress adds up. Those little things you do while you're avoiding the main thing, they create a foundation. Before you know it, the big task doesn't seem so overwhelming anymore because you've chipped away at all the smaller pieces around it. Maybe you've sorted out your priorities, or you've done some low-level prep work that makes the main event feel a little less daunting. It's like circling the task, getting closer and closer, until eventually, you can't avoid it, and by then, it doesn't feel so terrifying. Another cool thing about productive procrastination? It relieves the pressure. Instead of sitting there stressing about what you should be doing and spiraling into inaction, you're still being useful. You're giving yourself permission to procrastinate, but with purpose. You don't have to feel guilty because, hey, you're still getting things done. Just not in the most direct way. But progress is progress, right? And here's where it gets even sneakier. Sometimes, while you're in the middle of these small tasks, you'll suddenly feel a surge of motivation for the bigger one. It's weird how it works, but by taking the pressure off yourself to get that massive task done right away, you free up mental space. Next thing you know, you're halfway through that daunting project without even realizing it. You got there by accident. So, instead of forcing yourself into an all-or-nothing mindset, use productive procrastination to soften the blow. You don't have to tackle the world today. You don't even have to tackle your biggest goal. Just do something that's useful. That small bit of progress might not feel like much in the moment, but over time, it adds up. You'll realize that even in your procrastination, you're still moving forward, and that's what matters. In the end, productive procrastination is like a backdoor into progress. It lets you be lazy in a smart way. You don't have to go full steam ahead all the time, you just have to keep inching forward, even if it's sideways. And trust me, those tiny steps, they'll get you to where you want to be. Number 9, schedule regular do-nothing time for creativity. Alright, let's talk about the magic of doing nothing. And no, I don't mean that lazy, scrolling on your phone while feeling guilty kind of nothing. I'm talking about intentional, purposeful do-nothing time. You might think it sounds counterproductive, especially if you're ambitious and always feeling like you should be doing something. But here's the thing, making time to do nothing might be the very thing that unlocks your creativity and boosts your productivity in ways you never imagined. Let's face it, our brains are overstimulated. We're constantly bombarded by information, to-do lists, notifications, and just the everyday noise of life. It's like having 50 tabs open in your brain's browser. There's no space for fresh ideas, no room for creative thinking to thrive. That's why you need to deliberately schedule time to do absolutely nothing. Not as a reward for finishing your tasks, but as an actual part of your routine. It's about creating mental breathing room. Now, when I say do nothing, I don't mean zoning out in front of the TV or endlessly refreshing social media. That's just swapping one form of noise for another. The kind of nothing we're talking about here is more like sitting with your thoughts, allowing your mind to wander without an agenda. It's that moment when you're not actively forcing yourself to be productive, but you're giving your brain the freedom to relax, roam, and, surprisingly, create. You see, creativity thrives in the gaps. It's when your brain is on idle that it starts to connect dots, come up with new ideas, or solve problems in ways you didn't expect. This is the opposite of multitasking or grinding through tasks. It's giving your mind the space to daydream, reflect, or simply be. And that's where the magic happens. You're not pressuring yourself to come up with brilliant ideas, they just show up, uninvited, when you least expect it. Think of it like planting seeds. You can't force them to grow by staring at them. You plant them, water them, and then let nature take its course. Your mind works the same way. You feed it with information, experiences, and ideas, but for all that to flourish, you need downtime. Time to let the seeds grow. Here's the kicker, Scheduling do-nothing time can feel strange at first. It can make you feel unproductive or even a little restless, especially if you're used to being on the go all the time. But trust the process. You don't need to fill every minute of your day with tasks to be successful. In fact, when you deliberately carve out moments of stillness, you're giving your mind a chance to reset, recharge, and come back stronger. Start small. Schedule 10 or 15 minutes here and there where you can just sit quietly. No phone, no distractions. Let your mind drift. Maybe you'll think about nothing in particular, maybe you'll daydream. Maybe your brain will throw a random idea at you out of nowhere. That's the beauty of it, you never know what's going to pop up when you give yourself permission to let go of the constant grind. Over time, you'll start to notice a difference. That sense of overwhelm? It'll start to fade. Ideas will come more naturally, and you'll feel more energized, not because you've been working harder, but because you've allowed yourself the space to breathe. It's counterintuitive, but sometimes, the best thing you can do to fuel your ambition is to intentionally do nothing at all. So, go ahead. Give your brain the vacation it didn't know it needed. Schedule that do-nothing time, and watch how creativity sneaks up on you when you least expect it. Number 10. Apply the one-touch rule to emails and messages. Let's dive into the world of emails and messages, a place where chaos reigns and stress multiplies with every new notification. We've all been there, the inbox that just keeps filling up, the unread messages stacking up, and suddenly, it's not just a few pings, it's a digital avalanche. So, what's the solution for the ambitious but lazy? Enter the one-touch rule. What's the one-touch rule? It's a mindset shift, really. The idea is simple. Whenever you open an email or message, you handle it right then and there. No opening, skimming, then closing it for later because, let's face it, later turns into days, and then that message becomes a source of guilt and stress. Instead, you make a decision on the spot. You either respond, delete, forward, archive, or file it away for a specific action. But the key is, you don't leave it hanging around, cluttering up your mental space. Here's the thing, when you keep revisiting the same emails or messages over and over without taking action, you're creating a mental loop. Your brain ends up using way more energy than it needs to, just by having to reprocess the same information. It's like watching a movie trailer 15 times without ever watching the actual movie. Pointless, right? The one-touch rule eliminates that energy drain by forcing you to deal with it immediately, so you don't have to keep circling back. Now, this doesn't mean you have to drop everything and write a novel-length reply to every single message as soon as it comes in. That's not what this is about. It's about making a decision. If it needs a response and you can do it in a minute or two, fire it off. Done. If it's something that's going to take more time or thought, the one-touch rule still applies. You just move it to a task list or schedule time to deal with it. But the key here is that it doesn't sit there, staring back at you every time you check your inbox, taunting you with its unfinished status. Think about how much clearer your mind would be if your inbox wasn't this constant, nagging reminder of unfinished business. With the one-touch rule, you're taking control of that. You're not passively letting messages build up into some monstrous to-do list in disguise. You're deciding, then and there, how to handle it. The decision might be quick: archive it, delete it, reply with a quick sentence, but it's a decision, and you're moving on. The sneaky part of email overload is that it can make you feel productive without actually being productive. You're doing something, but nothing's really getting done. You're just pushing things around, leaving loose ends everywhere. The one-touch rule stops this productivity theater in its tracks. It forces you to be decisive, to close loops, and to clear the clutter, mentally and digitally. And here's where the laziness factor comes in. The one-touch rule is great for anyone who leans toward the lazy side because, at its core, it's about efficiency. You're not letting things drag on, and you're certainly not letting small tasks balloon into stressful beasts. You touch it once, handle it, and move on. It's minimal effort for maximum return. Let's be real, most emails and messages don't need to be handled with the level of care we tend to give them. We overthink, we hesitate, we delay. But when you embrace the one-touch rule, you strip all of that away. You simplify. And when things are simple, they're easier. Less stressful. Less of a burden. In the end, the one-touch rule is about freeing yourself. Freeing yourself from the mental clutter of unresolved messages and the endless to-do list that lurks in your inbox. It's about keeping things moving, staying decisive, and not letting small tasks pile up into a mountain. Touch it once, handle it, and keep going. It's a game changer. Being ambitious and lazy isn't a contradiction, it just means you need to find smarter ways to work. So, if you're someone who dreams big but sometimes struggles with getting started, remember, it's about progress, not perfection. Break things down, focus on small wins, and embrace systems that make your life easier. Most importantly, don't beat yourself up. Success isn't about doing everything at once, it's about doing the right things consistently. In the next section, let's go over some important morning habits that are worth checking out. Number 1, hitting the snooze button. Okay, let's be real. The snooze button is probably one of the most tempting things in existence. It's like a tiny portal to extra sleep, a brief escape from reality where your bed feels like the coziest place on earth. But here's the thing, hitting that snooze button is a trap, a sneaky little habit that can mess up your entire morning and, honestly, your mindset for the day. Now, from a Stoic point of view, mornings are important. Stoicism teaches us to be in control of our actions, to face the day with purpose and intention. But what happens when you hit snooze? You're already giving up control. You're making the decision to delay, to put off the inevitable. The alarm goes off and, instead of getting up and taking on the day, you're choosing to retreat back into sleep. Sure, it feels harmless at the moment, but it's a signal to your brain, I'm not ready to deal with life yet. This habit doesn't just affect those first few minutes of your morning, it spills over into everything else. The moment you start delaying, you're setting a tone of procrastination. And that seeps into other areas. Maybe now you're rushing through your morning routine, grabbing whatever clothes are closest instead of dressing with intention, skipping breakfast or grabbing something less healthy because you're in a hurry. The day is already off to a messy start because you wanted just 5 more minutes. But there's more to it than just logistics. Hitting snooze is a form of resistance, a way of running away from what needs to be done. The Stoics believed in accepting what comes, whether it's easy or tough. The alarm clock is an external event, you can't control when it goes off, because, well, you set it the night before, but you can control how you respond. Will you get up and face the day, or will you bury your head under the pillow and let the world wait for you? When you hit snooze, you're choosing comfort over discipline. You're saying, I'll face things later, but later never comes easily. It's also worth thinking about how those extra minutes of sleep after snoozing aren't even real rest. You're not getting quality sleep in those intervals, just fragmented bits that make you feel groggier than if you'd gotten up the first time the alarm rang. So, really, you're sacrificing a clear mind and energy for a few more minutes of nothing. When you ditch the snooze button, you're reclaiming your morning. You're starting the day with a small win, setting the tone for more wins throughout the day. Imagine how much more confident and in control you'll feel knowing you got up on the first ring, no hesitation. That's Stoicism in action. It's about taking responsibility for how you greet the day, whether you do it groggily and with reluctance or with energy and readiness. And hey, mornings aren't always easy. No one's pretending they are. But if you can master that first moment, that first choice to get out of bed, you've already conquered something big before most people have even opened their eyes. That's powerful. Number 2, checking your phone immediately. It's tempting, isn't it? That familiar chime from your phone lights up your morning, and suddenly your hand's reaching for it before you even know what's happening. But if you're trying to live more mindfully, especially with a Stoic mindset, this is one habit you should kick to the curb. The moment you wake up, your mind is like a blank canvas. Do you really want the first strokes of your day to be filled with noise, notifications, and someone else's priorities? When you immediately dive into your phone, you're handing over the reins of your day. Think about it. That first scroll, whether it's social media, news, or email, pulls you into a whirlwind of content that you didn't choose. It might be a work email that stresses you out or a social media post that sparks comparison. In an instant, you're reacting. That's the key word, reacting. Stoicism is all about cultivating a sense of inner calm and control, but that goes right out the window when you allow external distractions to hijack your mood first thing in the morning. Now, let's not get too harsh. Phones are tools, and they're not inherently bad. But it's how we use them, and more importantly, when we use them, that really matters. In the quiet of the morning, your mind is still uncluttered. The Stoics believed in setting the tone for the day with intention and purpose. Checking your phone, however, yanks you away from that stillness. It's like inviting a crowd of people into your bedroom while you're still trying to rub the sleep out of your eyes. It's not just about the information overload either. There's something deeper happening when you reach for your phone before you've even had a moment to breathe. You're reinforcing a habit of dependency. Your brain begins to crave that instant hit of stimulation, and before long, it becomes automatic. You wake up, grab your phone, scroll. Repeat. This cycle becomes ingrained, and breaking free of it becomes harder the longer you let it go on. From a Stoic perspective, this is where the idea of self-control comes into play. Stoicism teaches us that true freedom comes from mastering ourselves, not from external things. When you let your phone dictate your morning, you're letting external things, notifications, messages, other people's agendas, control your thoughts and emotions. Over time, this chips away at your ability to act from a place of calm and clarity. So, what's the alternative? Instead of reacting, begin your day by responding, but to yourself. Give yourself the first few minutes of the morning. Breathe, stretch, reflect. If you're following Stoic practices, this might be the perfect time to meditate or journal. What do you want from today? How do you intend to handle whatever challenges come your way? These moments of quiet contemplation can set a powerful tone for the rest of your day, one that's grounded in your own values and purpose, rather than someone else's feed. In the end, breaking the habit of checking your phone first thing is about reclaiming your mornings, in your mind. It's about choosing how you want to start your day, with intention, mindfulness, and a sense of control. Number 3, overloading yourself with tasks or distractions. When it comes to mornings, one thing that really messes with your day is overloading yourself with tasks or distractions. It's easy to fall into this trap. You wake up, and your brain's already buzzing with a million things to do. You think, if I can get all of this done right now, the rest of the day will be smooth sailing. But here's the kicker, packing your morning full of tasks doesn't set you up for a productive day. Instead, it drains your energy before you've even had a chance to build momentum. You've probably been there. You've got your phone in one hand, trying to check emails while also trying to get dressed, eat breakfast, and mentally prepare for whatever the day holds. It's chaos. And while it might feel like you're being super productive, you're really just splitting your attention in so many directions that nothing gets your full focus. Stoicism, with its emphasis on calm and deliberate action, shows us that trying to do too much at once, especially at the start of the day, just leads to burnout and anxiety. Think about it. Mornings are supposed to be a time of calm, a reset from the day before, and a time to prepare for the challenges ahead. But when you overload yourself right out of bed, you rob yourself of that peace. Instead of getting a clear sense of what's important, you drown in the noise of all these tiny tasks that, in the grand scheme of things, don't really matter. Then there are distractions. Oh, distractions. They seem small and harmless, right? A quick scroll through social media, maybe a few minutes catching up on the news. But before you know it, you've spent 30 minutes on stuff that doesn't fuel your goals or give you any real value. Worse, your mind is now cluttered with information that has nothing to do with what you actually want to accomplish. It's like trying to drive a car with the radio blaring and windows down while someone's talking your ear off in the passenger seat. You can't think straight, let alone focus on the road ahead. A lot of people feel the pressure to start the day with a bang. They think if they're not busy every second, they're wasting time. But busyness and productivity are two very different things. Stoicism teaches us the power of intentional action. Instead of overloading yourself with a long to-do list first thing in the morning, it's better to start with a few meaningful tasks, things that truly matter and move the needle. This isn't to say that mornings should be lazy or unproductive. Far from it. But there's a balance to strike. The goal is to approach your day with clarity and purpose, not a frantic rush to check off boxes. When you slow down, prioritize, and cut out unnecessary distractions, you set the tone for a more productive, focused day. In fact, you'll likely find that by giving yourself space in the morning, you accomplish more in the long run. So, the next time you wake up, resist the urge to pile on the tasks or dive into distractions. Take a moment. Breathe. Think about what really needs your attention. Approach your day with intention, not overload, and you'll see how much smoother and more fulfilling your mornings, and your entire day, can become. Number 4, allowing random thoughts to dominate your mind. You know that moment when you wake up, and before you've even had a chance to rub the sleep out of your eyes, your brain is already off to the races? You haven't even gotten out of bed, and yet there's a flood of thoughts swirling around, stuff like, what if this happens, or I need to do this, that, and the other, or even just completely random nonsense that seems to pop in out of nowhere. It's almost like your mind becomes this chaotic, uncontrollable stream, and you're just along for the ride. But here's the thing, that's exactly what you don't want in the morning. From a Stoic perspective, the mind is something you're supposed to have control over. Stoicism emphasizes clarity, calmness, and focus, especially when it comes to how you manage your thoughts. But when you allow random, aimless thoughts to dominate your mind the second you wake up, you're essentially handing over control of your day before it's even begun. The Stoics would say you're letting yourself be ruled by chaos. And that's not exactly the best way to start your morning. Think about it, when your mind is racing like that, you're not really present. You're scattered, jumping from one thought to another, never really settling on anything. It's like your brain is throwing a million ideas at you, and instead of taking a moment to breathe, you're trying to juggle them all. No wonder it feels overwhelming. And what happens next? Well, usually, you start the day with this underlying sense of anxiety or stress because your thoughts are already out of control. One of the core principles in Stoicism is the idea of focusing only on what's within your control. You can't control the fact that your mind generates thoughts, that's just what it does. But you can absolutely control how you respond to those thoughts. Are you going to let them run the show, or are you going to choose which ones deserve your attention and which ones don't? When you wake up and let random thoughts dictate your morning, it's like showing up to your day with no direction, no purpose. You're just reacting, instead of taking charge. Here's where things get tricky. A lot of times, those random thoughts are sneaky, they feel important, urgent even. But most of the time, they're not. They're just noise. And when you let that noise take over, you lose sight of what really matters. The Stoics believed in starting the day with intention, with focus. That means recognizing those random thoughts for what they are, distractions. They pull you away from the present moment and from what you actually want to achieve. When you let your mind wander aimlessly, you're allowing outside influences, whether that's anxiety, random memories, or even just daydreams, to shape your day. Instead, imagine waking up with a clear mind, ready to face the day with purpose. When you actively choose to direct your thoughts, you're setting the tone for everything that follows. You're telling yourself, I'm in control here. It's not about being rigid or forcing yourself into some kind of mental discipline boot camp. It's about recognizing that first thing in the morning, your mind is a bit like a blank canvas. You get to choose what you paint on it. Will you fill it with random, chaotic brush strokes, or will you take the time to create something intentional? So, avoid letting random thoughts run your morning because, when you do, you're essentially letting external chaos dictate your internal peace. By practicing a bit of mental discipline, even just taking a moment to acknowledge and let go of unnecessary thoughts, you'll start your day with clarity. And that clarity? It's what makes all the difference. Number 5. Starting the day without intention or purpose. When you wake up in the morning, there's a certain power in the stillness. The world hasn't fully started moving yet, and for just a brief moment, you have the chance to set the tone for the day. But here's where a lot of people trip up. They just dive in head first, without even thinking about where they're headed. They get caught up in the flow of the day without ever asking themselves what they actually want from it. It's like getting into a car, starting the engine, and driving with no destination in mind. Sure, you'll go somewhere, but will it be where you want to be? Waking up without intention or purpose means you're starting the day on autopilot. You might go through the motions, shower, breakfast, commute, but something is missing. There's no grounding, no focus. You're reacting to whatever comes your way rather than steering the course. And if you think about it, that's not very Stoic, is it? The philosophy of Stoicism teaches us to be deliberate in how we live. It's not about controlling everything around us, that's impossible, but rather about controlling how we approach the world. And that begins with how we start our day. Without purpose, you're letting the events of the day dictate your mindset. With purpose, however, you're setting the agenda. You decide how you want to respond to challenges, rather than just reacting to whatever lands in your lap. Now, let's not make this sound too heavy. Living with intention doesn't mean you need to have some grand, life-changing plan every morning. It's not about having a 5-point strategy for conquering the world before noon. It can be as simple as checking in with yourself and deciding what kind of person you want to be today. What are your priorities? What's important to you? Are you going to let stress dictate your mood, or will you face the day with a sense of calm and presence? Just a moment of reflection before you jump into the day can make all the difference. When you start your day with purpose, you're giving yourself the gift of clarity. You're not just floating from task to task, hoping everything works out. Instead, you're making conscious decisions about how you want to move through the world. This creates a sense of agency. And in Stoicism, that's huge. The Stoics were all about focusing on what's within your control, and guess what? Your attitude, your intention, and how you approach the day are all completely within your control. On the flip side, without intention, it's easy to feel overwhelmed. Things come at you from all directions, and before you know it, you're caught up in a whirlwind of distractions. You're left feeling scattered, unfocused, and like you're constantly playing catch-up. Starting the day without purpose leaves you vulnerable to whatever the world throws at you. You're not in the driver's seat, and that can lead to frustration, stress, and even burnout over time. So, what's the takeaway here? Mornings are a blank slate. Every day is a new opportunity to decide who you want to be and how you want to show up. Starting your day with purpose isn't about rigid control, it's about being mindful and intentional. It's about choosing to live deliberately, not just reacting to life as it happens. Number 6. Comparing yourself to others immediately. One of the quickest ways to derail a perfectly good morning is to start comparing yourself to others the minute you wake up. It's such an easy habit to fall into, especially in a world where we're bombarded with images, posts, and stories about how great everyone else's life looks. But let's be real, it's not doing you any favors. When you compare yourself to someone else first thing in the morning, you're setting yourself up for a day full of self-doubt and frustration. Picture this: you roll out of bed, grab your phone, and start scrolling through social media. You see someone who looks like they've got it all together. Maybe they've already hit the gym, made a perfectly plated breakfast, or are crushing it at work while you're still struggling to shake off sleep. In that instant, instead of focusing on your own day, you're consumed by thoughts like, why am I not doing that? Why don't I look like that? Am I falling behind? It's a mental trap, and once you're in it, it's hard to climb out. Here's the thing: comparing yourself to others first thing in the morning shifts your attention away from what really matters: your own life, your own goals, and your own journey. Stoicism teaches us that we only have control over ourselves, our actions, our thoughts, and our responses to what happens around us. When you start your day measuring yourself against someone else, you're giving away that control. You're letting someone else's life, which you only see a tiny piece of, dictate how you feel about your own. And it's never a fair comparison. You're looking at someone's highlight reel and stacking it up against your behind-the-scenes footage. Of course, it's going to feel imbalanced. You're not seeing their struggles, their bad days, or the challenges they've overcome. You're just seeing the polished, picture-perfect moments they've chosen to share, which don't tell the full story. But even if you could see the full picture, does it really matter? Their path is not your path. Stoicism reminds us to focus on what we can control, and comparing yourself to others is the opposite of that. It's focusing on things outside your control, what someone else is doing, achieving, or presenting to the world. All that does is create unnecessary stress and distract you from your own progress. Instead of starting your day in comparison mode, try starting with a focus on yourself. What do you want to accomplish today? How can you make the most of your time? What can you control? These are the questions that matter. These are the things that will actually help you grow, rather than pulling you into a spiral of envy or self-criticism. And here's the thing: when you stop comparing yourself to others, you free up so much mental space. Space to focus on your own growth, your own values, and your own happiness. The more you practice this, the more you realize that other people's successes or appearances don't diminish your own. You're on your own unique path, and the only comparison that really matters is who you were yesterday versus who you are today. So tomorrow morning, when the temptation to compare creeps in, take a breath. Remember that you're not in competition with anyone else. Your morning is yours, and you get to decide how to spend it, focused on your own journey, not someone else's. Number 7. Complaining or focusing on negativity. Negativity is one of those things that has a way of snowballing, especially in the morning when your brain is still warming up. One small complaint, and it's like the floodgates open. Suddenly, you're focusing on everything that's wrong: the weather, your workload, the tiny annoyances that haven't even happened yet. The mind loves to latch onto these things and turn them into mountains out of molehills. Now, here's where Stoicism comes in. Stoicism teaches that we can't control what happens to us, but we can control how we respond. And when you start your day by complaining or fixating on negative stuff, you're surrendering that control. You're allowing external factors to dictate how you feel, how you think, and ultimately, how you act. It's like you're handing over the keys to your mind before you've even had breakfast. The funny thing is, complaining feels like it gives you something, right? Like it's this release valve for frustration. But if you've ever spent time in that headspace, you know it doesn't actually help. It just keeps feeding into itself. The more you complain, the worse you feel, And the worse you feel, the more you complain. It's a vicious cycle. And it sets a negative tone for your entire day, making everything that follows feel heavier and more challenging than it needs to be. A Stoic would say that the problem isn't the things you're complaining about, it's your perspective on them. The weather isn't good or bad, it just is. Your busy schedule? Same thing. It's neutral, just a collection of tasks. But the moment you start slapping labels like bad or stressful on everything, that's when the negativity creeps in. It's all about your interpretation. Complaining is simply amplifying that interpretation, giving it more power than it deserves. Another thing about focusing on negativity in the morning, it's draining. You've just woken up, this is when your energy should be at its highest, your mind clear and ready to face the day. But if your first instinct is to focus on what's wrong, you're wasting that precious mental energy before you've even started. Instead of using that energy to tackle your day with purpose, you're funneling it into thoughts that do nothing but drag you down. And here's the Stoic twist: when you stop complaining, when you choose to focus on what you can control instead of what you can't, there's a surprising amount of freedom in that. It doesn't mean you ignore reality or pretend everything's perfect. It means you acknowledge things for what they are, without giving them more emotional weight than necessary. You meet the day on your terms, with resilience and clarity. Complaining, after all, is passive. It's a way of saying, I don't like this, but I'm not going to do anything about it. Stoicism encourages action, taking responsibility for your reactions, not getting bogged down in negativity or helplessness. Every time you choose not to complain, you're reclaiming a bit of your power, your mental space. You're actively shaping your mindset instead of letting it be shaped by circumstances beyond your control. So, next time you catch yourself starting the day with a complaint, stop. Ask yourself, does this help me? Is this how I want to spend my morning energy? Chances are, the answer will be no. And in that moment, you can shift your focus, redirect your thoughts, and start your day with a little more strength, a little more clarity, and a lot less negativity. Number 8. Neglecting to plan the day ahead. Waking up without a plan for the day? That's like heading out on a road trip without a map or destination in mind. Sure, you might stumble across some cool spots along the way, but more often than not, you'll end up circling the same streets or wandering aimlessly. The truth is, neglecting to plan your day is a sneaky habit that can derail your productivity and throw off your sense of control, leaving you feeling scattered or, worse, stressed. Now, I get it. The idea of sitting down to plan the day might sound a bit rigid or unnecessary, especially if you've got a lot going on. But think about it, how often do we get caught in the whirlwind of a day, reacting to everything that comes our way instead of actively deciding how to handle it? Without even realizing it, we're swept up in everyone else's agenda, losing track of what we wanted to focus on in the first place. From a Stoic perspective, this is a major red flag. The Stoics believed in being deliberate with our actions, in knowing what we can control and directing our energy toward it. And what's more in your control than how you spend your time? When you start your day without a plan, you're handing over your freedom to external forces, emails, distractions, interruptions, letting them dictate how your hours unfold. It's like giving the reins of your mind to whatever happens to come your way, instead of intentionally steering your course. But let's flip the script. When you take even just a few minutes in the morning to plan, you're reclaiming that control. You're making the choice about what gets your attention and what can wait. It's a small act, but the impact is huge. A simple outline of your day can give you clarity and focus, helping you prioritize the things that truly matter. Whether it's tackling a big project, carving out time for personal growth, or simply deciding that today, you'll approach things with more patience, that plan sets the stage for a day that's yours. Now, don't think of this planning as some overwhelming to-do list. It's not about cramming every minute with tasks or rigidly sticking to a schedule. Think of it more like setting intentions, guiding principles for the day. You're identifying what's most important, what aligns with your values, and making sure those things get attention. It's like taking the time to check your compass before setting out into the world. Without this intention, the day has a way of slipping away. You might start with good energy, but distractions and little unimportant tasks creep in. Suddenly, it's afternoon, and you haven't even touched the things you wanted to work on. You end up chasing the day rather than leading it. That lack of direction can leave you feeling like you're just surviving rather than thriving, constantly caught in a loop of reaction. Planning the day isn't just about productivity, though. It's about peace of mind. When you have a plan, you're not constantly wondering what you should be doing next or stressing over forgotten priorities. Instead, you can approach the day with a sense of calm, knowing you've already made thoughtful decisions about where your time will go. And when unexpected things come up, and they always do, you're better equipped to handle them without losing your sense of focus. So, here's the takeaway: taking a moment in the morning to plan isn't just a task. It's a form of self-care. It's you taking charge of your time, your priorities, your life. And from a Stoic point of view, that's exactly what it means to live with intention, rather than letting the day carry you wherever it pleases. Number 9. Skipping morning meditation or mindfulness. One of the most powerful things you can do for yourself in the morning is take a few moments to just be, to center your thoughts, focus your mind, and get grounded before diving into the chaos of the day. Yet, it's so tempting to skip morning meditation or mindfulness. You wake up, the to-do list is looming, and you think, I don't have time for that today, or I'll do it later. But we both know how that story goes: later never really comes, and you end up charging headfirst into the day without ever hitting pause. And sure, skipping it might seem like a small thing. What's the big deal, right? But here's the catch: morning meditation or mindfulness isn't just another item on your checklist. It's like setting the compass for your day. Without it, you're more likely to be pulled in 100 different directions, reacting to whatever comes your way, instead of intentionally choosing how to respond. Stoicism is all about taking control of how we approach life's challenges, and meditation or mindfulness is a key tool in that arsenal. When you start your day without mindfulness, it's like hopping into a car and hitting the gas without checking the map first. Sure, you'll move, but where are you actually going? You might feel like you're doing all the things, but you're not steering the ship. You're just being tossed around by the waves of distractions, stress, and noise. By skipping that morning moment of stillness, you miss out on the chance to set your intentions, to decide what's worth your energy and what's not. And the thing is, morning meditation or mindfulness doesn't have to be some grand, time-consuming ritual. You don't need to sit in silence for an hour or chant anything, unless you want to, of course. It can be as simple as sitting quietly for 5 minutes, focusing on your breath, or even just noticing how you're feeling as you wake up. The point is to create a little space between your waking thoughts and the flood of the day's demands. That space is golden. It allows you to observe your thoughts instead of being consumed by them. It helps you recognize the difference between what's truly important and what's just noise. In the context of Stoicism, this is huge. The Stoics believed in cultivating inner calm and clarity, no matter what's happening externally. And what better way to practice that than by starting your day with a moment of mindfulness? You're training yourself to approach the day with more intention, more awareness, and less reactionary behavior. Now, compare that to the mornings where you skip it. You might feel like you're saving time, but in reality, you're setting yourself up for a day of being on edge. Without that grounding moment, it's easier to get sucked into stress, frustration, or anxiety as things inevitably go wrong or unexpected challenges pop up. You haven't given yourself the mental clarity to deal with it all calmly. You're just reacting, like a pinball bouncing off everything that comes at you. And here's the beauty of sticking with morning mindfulness: it adds up. The more you practice it, the more you notice its impact throughout your day. You become more present, less thrown by distractions, and more in tune with what actually matters. It's like building a muscle. Each morning you take even a few minutes for mindfulness, you're strengthening your ability to navigate the world with clarity and calm. So, the next time you're tempted to skip it, remind yourself, those few minutes of mindfulness in the morning aren't just a luxury. They're the foundation of how you'll approach everything else in your day. By taking time to center yourself, you're giving yourself the gift of presence, focus, and a little bit of peace before life's noise tries to take over. Number 10. Failing to engage in gratitude practice. Alright, so picture this, the alarm goes off, and the day is officially in motion. What's your first instinct? Maybe you check your phone, think about your to-do list, or dive into whatever happened yesterday. But how often do you start your day by reflecting on what you're grateful for? It might sound like one of those feel-good, new-agey habits, but hold up, there's something deeply Stoic about it. Stoicism is all about perspective, right? It's about understanding that life is full of ups and downs, things you can control and things you can't. But here's the kicker, no matter what's happening around you, there's always something to be grateful for. The problem is, most of us don't pause to acknowledge that, especially in the morning when our minds are busy gearing up for the day. When you skip a gratitude practice, you're missing out on a chance to set the tone for your entire day. Let's break it down. Mornings are a clean slate, a fresh start. You have a moment, however brief, to decide how you want to approach the hours ahead. If you jump straight into your tasks or your worries, you're already giving external stuff more power than it deserves. But if you take even a minute to reflect on something you're thankful for, you shift your mindset. Suddenly, the day isn't just a series of challenges or stresses, it becomes an opportunity. Gratitude is like a mental reset button. It's a way to remind yourself, hey, things might not be perfect, but there's still good here. And that small shift in perspective can make a huge difference. It's not about ignoring life's difficulties or pretending everything's rainbows and sunshine. It's about acknowledging the good, even if it's buried under layers of tough stuff. From a Stoic perspective, failing to engage in gratitude is like voluntarily blinding yourself to the positive aspects of life. The Stoics believed in accepting reality as it is, but they also taught that we can choose how we see it. When you actively practice gratitude, you're training your mind to focus on what's right instead of what's wrong. And that's powerful. Another thing, gratitude keeps you grounded. When you start your day recognizing what you already have, it's easier to let go of the constant craving for more. The Stoics were big on the idea of sufficiency, the notion that we already have everything we need to live a good life. But if you're not taking the time to reflect on that, it's easy to get caught up in the endless chase for something new, something better. Practicing gratitude helps you realize, hey, I'm okay. More than okay, actually. Skipping this practice might seem like no big deal, but here's where it gets tricky. If you're not making gratitude a priority, it's all too easy to let negativity, stress, or dissatisfaction creep in. Those feelings can quickly dominate your thoughts and set the wrong tone for your day. You end up focusing on what's lacking, what's missing, or what's frustrating. And once that mindset takes over, it's hard to shake. But a few moments of gratitude can flip the script, offering a sense of calm, clarity, and contentment that carries you through the day. So, here's the deal, a morning gratitude practice isn't some fluffy, feel-good ritual. It's a Stoic tool, a way of training your mind to see the world more clearly and with more balance. It helps you focus on what you can control, your attitude, your mindset, and let go of what you can't. When you skip this practice, you're letting an opportunity slip through your fingers. You're allowing external pressures, distractions, and negative thoughts to fill the void instead. But when you start your day with gratitude, you're taking control. You're choosing to see the good, however small, and that choice shapes everything that follows. Thanks for watching. Remember, our mornings set the tone for the entire day, and by avoiding these habits, you can start your day with clarity and purpose. As Stoicism teaches us, we have the power to shape our mindset and actions. So, take control, make mindful choices, and live each day with intention. Let's learn how you can build self-discipline by following Stoic lessons. Number 1. Maintain consistency in routine. Maintaining consistency and sticking to a routine can feel like one of the most challenging aspects of building self-discipline. But here's the thing, it's also one of the most powerful tools you can have in your arsenal. It's like that dependable backbone that keeps everything else upright. Think of it this way, without some level of consistency, all those big plans, goals, and ambitions you've set for yourself tend to drift, like a ship without a rudder. Discipline without a routine is like a recipe without a method, lots of potential, but no structure to bring it all together. Now, when people hear the word routine, they might think of something rigid, dull, and lifeless. A lot of folks picture monotonous schedules that drain the joy out of life. But that's not what this is about. The Stoics weren't advocating for a life of robotic repetition, they believed in living intentionally. And that's what a good routine is, it's about choosing actions that align with what you value and want in your life, then doing them consistently. It's about setting up a flow that supports your goals, rather than working against them. And the beauty of it? You can build it to fit the life you want. Starting small is key here. It's tempting to overhaul your whole day at once, but that's often a recipe for burnout. Instead, begin by weaving in just a few habits that really matter to you. A couple of non-negotiables, maybe it's journaling at the start of your day, or dedicating 20 minutes to something that fuels your growth. Make them easy, almost too easy to skip. The goal isn't to be perfect right away, but to establish a rhythm, something that gently pulls you forward even on days when motivation is nowhere to be found. And that's where the magic of consistency kicks in. Motivation is fleeting, we know that. Some days, you'll feel on top of the world and others, not so much. But when you've got a solid routine, those feelings don't derail you. Instead, the routine acts like a default setting, something you fall back on without thinking too much about it. You show up, you do the thing, and you keep moving. Over time, this builds momentum. It's like compounding interest, small, regular actions that seem insignificant in the moment but snowball into something powerful over time. Of course, this doesn't mean every day will feel the same. Routines are flexible, they're adaptable, but they also give you a sturdy framework. Think of it like scaffolding, it supports the structure as you build. You can switch things up and add new elements as you grow, but the foundation is always there to keep you grounded. Now, there will be times when sticking to your routine feels like a chore, when the excitement fades and it starts to feel like a grind. This is where Stoic philosophy can be a real game changer. The Stoics remind us that discipline isn't about doing what's fun or easy, it's about doing what's necessary. In those moments when the routine feels heavy, it helps to remind yourself why you're doing it in the first place. Your routine isn't just busy work, it's a tool you've chosen to help you become the person you want to be. And if you slip up, if you miss a day, don't sweat it. The key is not to throw in the towel. One misstep doesn't ruin all the work you've put in. The Stoics weren't about perfection, they understood that being human means you're going to stumble sometimes. What matters is how quickly you get back on track. The routine is always there waiting for you, like an old friend. It's not about never faltering, it's about showing up again and again. So, in essence, maintaining consistency and routine isn't about locking yourself into a rigid schedule that you hate. It's about creating a foundation that supports you, even when life gets chaotic, even when you don't feel like it. It's about giving yourself the gift of structure, so you can focus on what really matters, becoming the best version of yourself, day by day. Number 2, avoid distractions and temptations. Avoiding distractions and temptations is like guarding the gates to your mind. In the fast-paced world we live in, distractions are everywhere, and it's easy to get swept up in them if you're not careful. Phones ping with notifications, social media lures you in with endless scrolling, and even your own thoughts can become distractions if you let them run wild. It feels like you're in a constant battle to stay focused on what matters. But what if you could create a little bubble of calm around yourself where distractions don't get to you as easily? That's where the Stoic mindset comes in. Stoics believed in controlling what's within your power and letting go of what's not. Distractions? You have power over them. Temptations? You can resist them. It's about recognizing when your attention is being pulled away and then making a conscious choice to pull it back. Imagine you're in the middle of working on something important, but a notification pops up, trying to grab your attention. In that split second, you can either give in and check it, or you can acknowledge it's there and keep doing what you're doing. The key is to train yourself to pause in that moment, breathe, and ask, is this worth my time right now? Distractions are sneaky because they often seem harmless. One quick scroll through social media won't hurt, right? But that quick scroll can turn into minutes, then hours. Temptations, too, can be disguised as small, harmless indulgences. A Stoic knows that giving into these distractions and temptations doesn't align with their long-term goals. And that's what discipline is really about, keeping your eyes on the bigger picture. Part of avoiding distractions is knowing where they come from and creating environments that don't encourage them. If you know your phone distracts you, put it in another room while you work. If your mind wanders easily, set shorter, more focused periods of work. It's not about rigidly controlling every second of your day, but about removing unnecessary interruptions. Every time you remove a distraction, you're creating more space for focus and growth. There's also the temptation to give into easy rewards. A Stoic would remind themselves that immediate gratification is often fleeting. The sugary snack or extra hour of sleep may feel good now, but will it really matter in the long run? By practicing the art of delaying gratification, you strengthen your self-discipline. It's like building a muscle. Each time you say no to a temptation, you're making it easier to do so again. You don't have to be perfect. Even the most disciplined person will face moments where they get distracted or give in to temptation. The Stoic approach isn't about perfection but progress. It's about recognizing when you've strayed and gently guiding yourself back on track. It's not a failure to be tempted, it's a victory every time you choose not to give in. At the heart of it all is this: you get to choose where your attention goes. You get to decide what matters. When you actively avoid distractions and temptations, you're showing yourself that you value your time and energy. You're proving that your goals matter more than a fleeting urge or passing fancy. That's real discipline. And over time, it becomes second nature, just like the Stoics intended. Number 3, develop a sense of inner calm through meditation. Developing a sense of inner calm through meditation might sound like a simple task, but the impact it can have on your self-discipline is anything but ordinary. Meditation is like training your mind to sit still, even when the world around you is spinning in 100 directions. It's not just about sitting cross-legged and closing your eyes, though that's part of it, but it's also about tuning into the present moment and learning to let go of the noise that clouds your focus. Think of meditation as a way to declutter your mind. We all know that feeling of overwhelm, when your to-do list is longer than your patience, and your mind feels like it's jumping from one thing to the next without a moment's rest. It's in these moments when discipline starts to crumble. You might find it harder to resist distractions, to stick to your goals, or to follow through on what you've promised yourself. Meditation, though, gives you a chance to hit the pause button. By focusing on your breath or a specific mantra, you bring your awareness back to the present, quieting that mental chaos. Here's the thing: meditation isn't just about feeling calm for those 10 or 15 minutes you're sitting in silence. The real magic happens when you take that calm out into your daily life. With regular practice, you begin to notice that the same stressors and distractions that used to shake you up don't have the same power over you anymore. You become a little more unshakable, a little more grounded. That's where the Stoic approach really ties in. It's not about avoiding chaos or difficulty, but about cultivating a mind that remains steady in the face of it. When you make meditation a part of your routine, you're essentially strengthening your ability to stay in control, to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. And this, in essence, is the foundation of discipline. You start to notice when you're slipping into old habits or getting lost in thoughts that don't serve you. Instead of getting swept away, you can take a breath, pause, and make a conscious choice to stay aligned with your goals. It's about mastering that moment of decision, which is where discipline either wins or fails. Also, it's important to realize that meditation doesn't require perfection. Your mind will wander, probably a lot at first, but that's not a failure. The real discipline comes in gently bringing your focus back, over and over again. That's the same kind of mental muscle you'll need when building self-discipline in other areas of your life. Every time you resist the urge to give up on a tough task or avoid a distraction, it's like bringing your mind back to meditation. You're training yourself to stay steady, even when it would be easier to drift away. Meditation, then, becomes a daily practice in controlling the mind, which is the first step in controlling your actions. Over time, you'll find that sense of inner calm seeping into other aspects of your life. You'll make better decisions, stay more focused on your goals, and most importantly, build a stronger sense of self-discipline. So, meditation isn't just about relaxation, it's about training your mind to stay cool, calm, and collected in the face of whatever life throws at you. When you can master that, discipline follows naturally. Number 4, train yourself to accept criticism without ego. Learning how to accept criticism without letting your ego get in the way is like training a muscle. It takes time, effort, and a whole lot of patience. It's not something that happens overnight. But if you can master this, you'll unlock a deeper level of self-discipline that most people struggle with. At first, criticism stings, right? It's like a hit to the gut, especially when you're proud of what you've done. We all like to believe that we're doing things right, that we've got it all figured out. So when someone comes along and points out a flaw or tells us we could do better, the natural reaction is to get defensive. You might feel that surge of irritation rising up. Your brain starts forming arguments, excuses, justifications. Your ego flares up, wanting to protect itself. It's a knee-jerk reaction. We all feel it. But here's where the Stoic mindset comes into play. The Stoics believe that the only things within our control are our thoughts and actions. The opinions of others? Completely outside our control. This is key when it comes to criticism. The Stoic way teaches us to pause when that criticism comes our way. Instead of letting the ego take over and launch into defense mode, we stop and reflect. Is there truth in what's being said? Even if the delivery is harsh, is there something valuable to learn? Here's where it gets tricky, though. The ego loves to take things personally. It loves to make criticism feel like a personal attack, as if someone pointing out a mistake means that you are fundamentally flawed. But that's just not the case. One of the most powerful things you can do is detach yourself from the feedback. Instead of seeing it as a judgment on who you are, look at it as neutral information. That's all it is, information that can help you grow if you let it. This doesn't mean you have to accept every piece of criticism as gospel truth. Not all feedback is helpful, and some of it can be misguided. But that's where the Stoic practice of discernment comes in. You can evaluate criticism without attaching your ego to it. Take what's useful, leave the rest, and keep moving. Now, accepting criticism doesn't just strengthen your discipline, it also builds resilience. When you're not constantly guarding your ego, you become more open to learning. The more you train yourself to listen to feedback, the less those critiques will bother you over time. You become tougher, not in the sense of shutting down emotionally, but in the sense of being less rattled by outside opinions. It's like building a thicker skin, but without becoming closed off or bitter. And there's a kind of freedom in that, isn't there? When you're no longer held hostage by your ego, you can start to see criticism for what it is, an opportunity. Every time someone gives you feedback, even if it's not delivered in the nicest way, you have the chance to grow. You can improve, adjust, sharpen your skills. That's the real win here, not proving that you're right, but constantly getting better. Of course, this doesn't happen naturally. You'll catch yourself slipping into old habits, wanting to defend yourself, feeling that twinge of pride. That's normal. But the more you practice, the easier it gets. Over time, you'll start to crave feedback because you'll see how much it helps you evolve. You'll develop a mindset that's focused on improvement, rather than validation. In the end, training yourself to accept criticism without letting your ego run the show is one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself. It's tough at first, no doubt. But with practice, you'll find it's incredibly liberating. It shifts your focus from worrying about how others see you to focusing on how you can grow. And isn't that what true self-discipline is all about? Continually refining yourself, bit by bit, without letting the noise get in the way? Number 5. Break tasks into manageable steps. When you're faced with a big task, it can feel like standing at the foot of a mountain, staring up at this massive thing you have to climb. It's daunting, overwhelming, and can make you question if you even want to start. But here's the thing, you don't have to tackle the whole mountain at once. Instead, you can take it step by step, breaking that big task into smaller, more manageable pieces. This is a simple yet powerful strategy that aligns perfectly with the Stoic approach to discipline. Stoicism teaches us to focus on what we can control in the present moment. So, when a task feels too big, zoom in. Narrow your focus. Instead of worrying about the entire thing, ask yourself, what's the first step I can take? By breaking it down into smaller chunks, each step becomes less intimidating. You're no longer trying to conquer the mountain, you're just taking the next step, one foot in front of the other. When you start to look at tasks this way, they become less overwhelming and more achievable. Suddenly, the enormity of the task shrinks. You're not trying to do everything at once, but rather, you're moving forward in a focused, deliberate way. The smaller steps might not seem significant at first, but they add up. And before you know it, you're further along than you thought possible. One of the challenges we face when trying to be disciplined is the urge to procrastinate, especially when a task feels like too much. It's easy to think, I'll do this later when I have more time or energy. But breaking tasks down helps counter that urge. Small steps are easier to start. When something feels manageable, you're more likely to begin right away rather than put it off. And starting is often the hardest part. The Stoics believed in being present, working with what's in front of you, and not getting lost in thoughts about the future or the past. By breaking tasks into smaller steps, you're staying grounded in the now. You're not worrying about everything that still needs to be done, you're just focused on what you can do right now, in this moment. It's practical and calming at the same time. Another benefit of breaking things down is that it gives you a sense of accomplishment along the way. Each small step you complete is a mini victory. And those little wins? They add fuel to your motivation. It feels good to check something off, even if it's a tiny part of the whole. It builds momentum, and once you have that momentum, it becomes easier to keep going. Of course, it's important to remind yourself that this approach isn't about rushing. Stoicism isn't about hurrying through life. It's about patience and persistence. When you break tasks down, you give yourself permission to move at a steady pace. You're not rushing to finish everything all at once, but you're also not standing still, paralyzed by the size of what you need to do. Instead, you're making consistent, steady progress. And that's where real discipline is built. In the end, breaking tasks into manageable steps is about giving yourself the tools to succeed. It's about working smart, not hard. Each small step may seem insignificant on its own, but when combined, they create something powerful. So, next time you're faced with a big task, remember, you don't have to do it all at once. Just take the next step. That's all it takes. Number 6. Build mental toughness through physical discipline. Building mental toughness through physical discipline is a game changer. There's something about pushing your body that sharpens the mind in a way few other things can. It's like a direct line between the challenges you set for your physical self and the strength that forms in your mind. The more you put yourself through physically, the more resilient you become mentally. And that's really what discipline is about, right? It's not just being able to resist temptation or stick to a plan. It's about being mentally tough enough to keep going, even when everything in you wants to quit. Physical discipline can be anything that demands effort, a workout, a run, or even just sticking to a simple routine you've committed to. The important part isn't the activity itself, but how you engage with it. Every time you push through that last rep when your muscles are screaming, or when you lace up your shoes to get moving even though you don't feel like it, you're doing more than just challenging your body. You're teaching your mind that it can endure discomfort, that it can handle the grind. And once your mind gets used to the idea of pushing past limits, it gets easier to do the same in other areas of life. What's fascinating is how closely connected the mind and body are when it comes to discipline. When you challenge your body, you're also forcing your mind to grow. The moment you start feeling that burn in your muscles or the fatigue settling in, your mind jumps in with excuses. It'll tell you, that's enough for today, or you've done enough, just stop. But here's where the real magic happens. When you choose to ignore that voice and keep going, you're building mental toughness. You're training your brain to handle discomfort, to push through the I can't moments and transform them into I will moments. And this translates directly into everyday life. If you can endure physical challenges, then you can endure mental ones too. That's why physical discipline is such a key part of developing overall self-discipline. When you get used to dealing with physical discomfort, it becomes easier to face emotional or mental discomfort. It builds a kind of resilience, a toughness that says, I've been here before, and I know I can handle this. The body may be tired, but the mind knows what it's capable of, and that's the real reward. The Stoics often talked about preparing for adversity, and this is exactly what physical discipline does. It conditions you to handle the hard stuff. You start to realize that discomfort is temporary and that you are stronger than you think. The more you practice this, the less scary it becomes to take on new challenges, to step outside of your comfort zone, or to stick with something even when it's not fun anymore. That's the heart of discipline, showing up, putting in the work, and doing it again tomorrow, no matter how you feel. Another thing to consider is that physical discipline doesn't have to be extreme. It's not about punishing your body or pushing yourself to the brink every day. It's about consistency. It's about making small, intentional choices that, over time, build into something powerful. Whether it's getting up early, committing to a daily exercise, or just sticking to a routine, it's these small acts of physical discipline that add up to mental strength. And once you've got that mental toughness, sticking to your goals, resisting temptations, and staying the course becomes second nature. In the end, physical discipline is like the training ground for your mind. Every time you push yourself physically, you're telling your mind that it's capable of more than it thinks. You're building a mindset that can handle challenges and push through tough moments. It's not just about becoming stronger physically, it's about creating the mental toughness that forms the foundation of true self-discipline. Number 7, embrace humility and lifelong learning. Embracing humility and committing to lifelong learning might just be one of the most overlooked elements of self-discipline. Yet, it's fundamental. You see, humility isn't about thinking less of yourself or downplaying your strengths. It's about recognizing that no matter how much you've achieved or learned, there's always more. There's always room to grow, always space for improvement. The moment you think you've arrived, that you know it all, you're stuck. You've stopped evolving. And that's a dangerous place to be. Now, let's talk about why humility matters so much when it comes to discipline. Discipline isn't just about forcing yourself to follow a strict schedule or resist temptation. It's also about having the awareness to recognize where you're lacking and the openness to learn from others. Humility is the key that unlocks that door. If you think you already know everything, if your ego is running the show, you're not going to see the gaps in your knowledge or your behavior. You'll resist feedback. You'll shy away from situations where you might look inexperienced or unskilled. That's not discipline, that's fear dressed up as pride. The Stoics had this incredible understanding that wisdom is never fully attained. You're always in the process of becoming wiser, never actually arriving at some final destination. It's like a journey without a finish line. When you embrace humility, you accept this reality. You acknowledge that there's something to learn from every experience, from every person you meet, even from your own mistakes. Especially from your own mistakes. Lifelong learning doesn't mean you need to be constantly cramming new facts into your brain or signing up for courses left and right. It's more about adopting a mindset of curiosity, of seeing every moment as an opportunity to grow. Whether it's reading, reflecting, having conversations, or observing how you react in certain situations, these are all chances to learn. Every day brings with it something new, some nugget of wisdom, but you'll only catch it if you're paying attention. And you'll only pay attention if you're humble enough to realize you don't already have it all figured out. Now, let's be honest. Lifelong learning can feel uncomfortable at times, especially when you're confronted with the fact that there's something you don't know or can't do. It's humbling, in the truest sense of the word. But here's the thing, that discomfort is where growth happens. Every time you step into that space of not knowing, you stretch yourself a little bit more. You develop the resilience and patience that are essential parts of discipline. Humility is like a doorway into that discomfort, and discipline is the willpower to keep walking through it, again and again. The beauty of the Stoic approach is that it makes the journey itself the focus, not some end goal. When you accept that you'll never be finished, never fully perfected, you stop putting pressure on yourself to get everything right all the time. Instead, you can focus on just getting better, bit by bit, day by day. Humility helps you be kinder to yourself when you fall short because you're not expecting perfection. You're expecting progress. And progress? That's what discipline is all about. So, to embrace humility in lifelong learning is to let go of the ego-driven need to be seen as the best or the expert. It's about becoming a student of life, always open to new lessons, even when they come in ways you didn't expect or particularly want. And that openness? That's what sets you free to truly develop self-discipline. It's not about locking yourself into rigid habits, but growing into the kind of person who welcomes challenges, learns from failures, and keeps evolving. In the end, humility isn't weakness, it's strength. And lifelong learning isn't a burden, it's a gift. Together, they form a powerful foundation for real discipline, the kind that lasts. Because if you're always willing to learn, you'll never stop improving. And if you're humble enough to keep going, no matter how much you've already accomplished, you'll always find ways to become better than you were yesterday. That's the Stoic way. That's self-discipline. Number 8, set clear, rational goals. Setting clear, rational goals is like giving yourself a roadmap to follow. Without it, you're just wandering, hoping you'll end up where you want to be. But here's the catch, the goals you set can't just be any goals. They need to be rational, grounded in reality, and aligned with who you are. The Stoics believed in using reason as a guiding force in life, and when it comes to discipline, that starts with having goals that make sense. When you sit down to think about what you want to achieve, it's easy to get caught up in fantasies of grand success or perfection. But Stoicism teaches us to avoid getting lost in unrealistic desires. Instead, focus on goals that are within your control, that you can realistically achieve with effort and focus. This doesn't mean you should aim low or settle for less, it means you need to be practical. What do you want? And more importantly, what are the steps you can take to get there? If your goals are too vague or too lofty, they won't guide you. They'll just hang over you like a cloud of uncertainty. Clear goals give you direction. Without them, you're likely to drift or find yourself constantly changing course, never really getting anywhere. You might work hard, but if you don't know what you're working toward, that effort doesn't go very far. The Stoic approach to discipline starts with defining what it is you want to achieve, and making sure that goal is rational and within your control. If it depends too much on external factors, you're setting yourself up for frustration. Stoics remind us to focus on what we can influence, not on what we can't. Once you've set your goal, break it down. Don't just say, "I want to accomplish X." Ask yourself, what does accomplishing X actually look like? What are the smaller pieces that make up the whole? That's the beauty of having a clear goal. It becomes a series of steps, a process. And the clearer your goal, the easier it is to map out that process. Each step becomes something you can take action on, something tangible. You start to see progress, even if it's slow, and that progress builds your discipline. Now, let's talk about rationality. Sometimes, we set goals that aren't really aligned with what we value. Maybe they're based on what we think we should want, or what other people expect of us. But deep down, they don't reflect who we are or what we actually care about. Stoicism encourages us to be brutally honest with ourselves. Are your goals rooted in reality? Are they aligned with your values? If they're not, you'll find it hard to stay disciplined. You might even start resenting the work because it feels like you're chasing something that doesn't matter to you. Discipline doesn't come from forcing yourself to grind away at something you don't believe in. It comes from having a clear vision of what you want and why it matters. When you know exactly what you're working toward and can see the logic behind it, discipline starts to feel less like a burden and more like a natural part of the process. You're not struggling against yourself, you're working with a purpose. So, take the time to set clear, rational goals. Don't rush this part. Think it through. What do you want, and why do you want it? Is it realistic? Is it within your control? Once you have that clarity, you'll find that sticking to the path becomes easier. You won't be swayed by distractions or temptations, because your goal will be clear, your reasons sound, and your discipline steady. That's the Stoic way. Number 9. Reflect daily on progress and failures. Reflecting daily on your progress and failures isn't just about keeping track of what you did or didn't accomplish. It's a powerful way to stay grounded and honest with yourself. It's like taking a step back to look at the bigger picture, while also zooming in on the details that really matter. Each day brings lessons, and when you take time to reflect on both your wins and your stumbles, you're sharpening your awareness of where you're growing, and where you need to step up your game. Let's face it, we're all moving through life at 1,000,000 miles per hour. It's easy to get caught up in the flow, just doing things without stopping to think about why you're doing them or if they're even working for you. That's where reflection comes in. It's like hitting the pause button, allowing you to take stock of the day. Did you stick to your commitments? Did you lose focus somewhere along the way? By reviewing these things, you're giving yourself a chance to acknowledge your efforts and course correct where needed. It's not about beating yourself up when things don't go as planned, it's about learning from the experience. Here's the cool part: when you make daily reflection a habit, you start to see patterns. Maybe you notice that certain distractions keep popping up, pulling you away from your goals. Or you might realize that on the days you meditate or stick to a morning routine, your self-discipline feels stronger. These insights are gold. They help you understand yourself better, which in turn makes it easier to adjust your approach. Reflection isn't just looking at the past, it's setting yourself up for a better tomorrow. But let's not sugarcoat it, reflection can also be uncomfortable. It forces you to confront your failures head-on, which isn't always fun. It's tempting to sweep mistakes under the rug or avoid thinking about the times you fell short. However, it's in these moments of discomfort that you can grow the most. When you face your failures without judgment, you take away their power. You start to see them for what they are, lessons. Every time you reflect on a failure, you're essentially turning it into a tool for your own development. That's where real discipline is born, not in avoiding failure, but in learning from it and using it to get stronger. On the flip side, reflecting on your successes is just as important. It's easy to get caught up in the chase for more and more progress, but if you don't take time to recognize what you've achieved, it's like running a race without ever celebrating the finish lines you cross. Reflection gives you that moment to say, "Hey, I did that. I stuck to my plan. I made progress." These small victories are fuel for your discipline. They remind you that all the effort, all the hard choices, are worth it. Now, how do you actually reflect? It doesn't have to be complicated. You could jot down a few notes in a journal or just sit quietly for a few minutes at the end of the day. Ask yourself questions like, what went well today? Where did I slip? How can I improve tomorrow? It doesn't need to be an intense, hour-long process, just a few moments of mindful review. What matters is the consistency. Over time, this simple practice builds a level of self-awareness that's crucial for anyone serious about developing discipline. In essence, daily reflection is about being real with yourself. It's about staying in tune with where you're at, celebrating your wins, and learning from your missteps. It's a way of staying accountable without relying on anyone else to do it for you. And the more you reflect, the more in control you feel over your decisions, your habits, and ultimately, your life. So, take a few moments each day to reflect, and watch how it strengthens not just your discipline but your entire mindset. Number 10. Prioritize long-term benefits over short-term pleasures. Prioritizing long-term benefits over short-term pleasures is like playing the ultimate game of chess with your own mind. It's all about seeing the bigger picture, resisting those tempting little distractions that promise instant gratification. You know the ones, scrolling endlessly through your feed, binge watching the latest show, or diving into that dessert just because it's there. They all offer a quick hit of pleasure, but they often come at a cost. Here's the kicker: the Stoics understood that these fleeting pleasures can be seductive. They pull at you, whispering sweet nothings about how satisfying they'll feel in the moment. But the truth is, those moments are just that, fleeting. They rarely lead to anything meaningful. Instead, the Stoics emphasized looking beyond the moment, asking yourself, what's the real payoff here? This is where the power of self-discipline comes into play. When you start shifting your focus from immediate satisfaction to long-term gain, everything changes. It's like flipping a switch in your brain. You begin to see those short-term pleasures for what they are, distractions that can derail you from your goals. Imagine if you put all that energy you'd normally spend chasing after instant gratification into something that truly aligns with your values and aspirations. The results could be transformative. Now, this doesn't mean you have to cut out all the fun stuff. Life is meant to be enjoyed. But it's about finding that balance, understanding when it's okay to indulge and when to hold back. Think of it as training your brain to recognize the difference between what feels good in the moment and what will feel good in the long run. This isn't just a one-time decision, it's an ongoing practice. It's also important to acknowledge that prioritizing long-term benefits often involves discomfort. Yes, it can be tough to resist that immediate pleasure. Sometimes, you'll feel like you're missing out, like you're denying yourself something that everyone else seems to enjoy. But here's where the Stoic perspective really shines. They teach us that discomfort can be a powerful teacher. When you lean into that discomfort, you start to cultivate resilience. You learn to withstand the pull of short-term pleasures and to appreciate the greater rewards that come from patience and persistence. Think of it like this: when you choose long-term benefits, you're essentially investing in your future self. You're making choices today that will pay off tomorrow. This might mean putting in the work now, whether it's studying, exercising, or even just taking a moment to reflect instead of diving into distractions. Over time, those small, consistent choices build up, creating a foundation of discipline that supports you in ways that immediate pleasures never could. Another aspect to consider is the satisfaction that comes from achieving long-term goals. There's something profoundly rewarding about working towards something and finally seeing it come to fruition. It's not just the end result, it's the journey, the growth, and the lessons learned along the way. Those moments of achievement have a depth that a fleeting pleasure just can't touch. So, the next time you're faced with a choice between the quick thrill and the steady path, pause for a moment. Ask yourself, what will this choice bring me in the long run? It's a small but powerful shift in mindset. When you start prioritizing those long-term benefits, you begin to cultivate a sense of purpose and direction. You're not just drifting through life, you're steering your ship towards something meaningful. In the end, embracing the Stoic way of prioritizing long-term benefits over short-term pleasures is all about learning to be patient with yourself. It's about understanding that the road may be longer, but the rewards are richer and far more satisfying. Each time you choose the enduring over the ephemeral, you're reinforcing your self-discipline, training your mind to focus on what truly matters. And isn't that what it's all about? Building a life that's not just filled with fleeting moments but with lasting fulfillment and growth. Thanks for joining me in this exploration of self-discipline through the lens of Stoicism. Remember, building self-discipline is a journey, not a destination. By embracing the Stoic principles we've discussed today, you can cultivate resilience and focus in your daily life. The next section primarily focuses on how to start with Stoicism. Number 1. Controlling reactions to external events. One of the core ideas in Stoicism is that we don't control what happens around us, but we do control how we react to it. It sounds simple, right? Yet, in practice, it's a whole different story. Life throws curveballs, unexpected situations that we couldn't have predicted, people who rub us the wrong way, events that don't go as planned. And in those moments, it's super easy to let emotions spiral, to get swept up in frustration, anger, or anxiety. But what if you could pause before reacting? What if you could meet those moments with calm instead of chaos? That's where controlling your reactions comes in, and it's a powerful tool for navigating life. At its heart, controlling reactions isn't about suppressing what you feel or pretending that nothing bothers you. No one is suggesting you walk around like a robot, immune to the world. Instead, it's about recognizing that there's a space, however small, between what happens and how you respond. In that space lies your freedom. You get to decide, do I react instinctively, letting emotions run the show, or do I step back, take a breath, and respond thoughtfully? Now, this practice doesn't mean trying to change the external event itself. Because, let's be honest, most things in life are out of our hands. The weather, traffic, someone else's mood, none of that is up to you. The Stoics believe that external events are indifferent. In other words, they don't inherently carry positive or negative value, it's how we interpret them that gives them meaning. So, if you see something as bad, frustrating, or unfair, it's likely because you've labeled it that way. The same event could happen to someone else, and they might shrug it off like it's nothing. That's the power of perception. One way to start practicing control over your reactions is to get comfortable with the idea of acceptance. No, This doesn't mean giving up or being passive. It means acknowledging that things happen without your consent. The world doesn't bend to your will. When something unwanted or uncomfortable happens, instead of resisting it, you accept that it's there. Okay, this is happening. That's the first step. You're not jumping into frustration or judgment. You're simply seeing it for what it is, a thing that's occurring. You can't change that, but you can control what happens next. From there, it's about choosing your response. You might feel anger bubbling up or disappointment sinking in, and that's normal. The key is not to let those emotions dictate what you do. Pause for a moment. Check in with yourself. What story are you telling about this event? Is there a way to see it differently? Maybe it's not as catastrophic as it feels. Maybe there's something you can learn from it. Or maybe, just maybe, it's not worth your energy at all. Stoicism encourages you to focus on what you can control. And the truth is, your reactions are within your control, at least, with practice they can be. It's like building muscle. At first, you might catch yourself reacting automatically, falling into old habits of getting angry or upset. But over time, as you bring more awareness to that space between stimulus and response, you'll find you have more choices. You can choose to be calm. You can choose patience. You can choose not to let the external world dictate your internal peace. And when you start controlling your reactions, something interesting happens. You feel lighter. You realize that most things aren't worth getting worked up over. You stop sweating the small stuff, and even the big stuff starts to seem more manageable. Because you're no longer at the mercy of what happens around you. You've got your own compass, and you're steering the ship. That's the essence of Stoicism, meeting the world as it is, without letting it pull you off course. Number 2, voluntary discomfort. We've all heard that life begins at the edge of your comfort zone, right? But how often do we actually step out of it, intentionally, that is? In Stoicism, this practice isn't just some feel-good mantra to post on social media. It's a deliberate exercise that Stoics call voluntary discomfort. Sounds intense? Maybe. But it's more about training your mind than punishing your body. At its core, the idea is simple. By regularly choosing to experience small amounts of discomfort, you can better handle life's inevitable challenges. Think about it like this: life throws curveballs all the time. You can't avoid them, but you can get better at dodging or catching them if you've prepared. When you willingly put yourself in uncomfortable situations, you're kind of simulating those challenges in a controlled way. You build resilience, confidence, and, oddly enough, peace of mind. Here's how it works. Imagine choosing to do something a bit inconvenient or uncomfortable on purpose. Maybe it's skipping a meal when you're feeling a bit peckish. Or maybe it's going for a walk in the rain without your umbrella. These are small, manageable things that no one would recommend for fun, but when you embrace them, you're sending a signal to your mind: I can handle this. And once your mind starts believing that, it becomes easier to handle bigger discomforts when they inevitably pop up in life. What's fascinating about this practice is that it starts to reshape your relationship with discomfort. Instead of running away from the first sign of struggle, you start to see it differently. You realize that a little discomfort isn't the enemy, it's part of life. It's a training ground. Each time you voluntarily face discomfort, you strip away some of its power over you. It stops feeling so scary. This exercise also connects with one of Stoicism's central teachings: recognizing the difference between what you can and can't control. Most of the time, the discomfort we dread is linked to things outside of our control: circumstances, other people, or just the randomness of life. Voluntary discomfort lets you take control over one small part of that equation: your response. You can't always change the situation, but you can control how you react. By choosing to be uncomfortable, you're flexing that control muscle, strengthening it little by little. And here's the thing, don't think of it as a punishment or some grim test of willpower. It's more like a mental workout. Just like you might hit the gym to strengthen your body, this practice strengthens your mind. At first, yeah, it's going to feel odd, maybe even a bit pointless. But over time, you'll start to notice changes. You'll feel more adaptable, more able to roll with the punches. You'll find that things that used to bother you no longer hold the same power. When you get to the point where discomfort no longer makes you feel rattled, you've unlocked something valuable. It doesn't mean you won't feel uncomfortable, of course, you will, but your reaction changes. You learn to accept it, even embrace it, because you've experienced it before on your own terms. That familiarity is key. It's like shaking hands with an old foe. Suddenly, it's not so intimidating. So, while it might seem counterintuitive at first, seeking out discomfort voluntarily isn't about suffering, it's about building strength, awareness, and a deeper sense of peace. You're not just toughening up, you're developing the tools to face life's chaos with a sense of calm. And that's the magic of it. Number 3, circles of hierarchals. The circles of hierarchals. This exercise has such an interesting way of making us rethink our relationship with others. It's almost like a mental map, designed to expand your sense of connection, to remind you that you're not isolated but deeply intertwined with everyone and everything around you. And, here's the thing, hierarchals, a Stoic philosopher, came up with this exercise centuries ago, yet it's still so incredibly relevant today. You can almost picture him drawing these circles in the sand or sketching them out on parchment, nudging us toward greater empathy, showing us how to stretch our sense of belonging. At the core, it's about seeing yourself in the center of these imaginary circles, surrounded first by your closest people, your immediate family, those you can reach out to right now. But here's where it gets really cool. As you move outward, each circle grows a little wider, and within those expanding boundaries, you bring in more and more people. Your extended family, your neighbors, your community, your country, humanity as a whole. It's like zooming out on a map, but instead of distance, you're measuring your sense of connection. Now, think about what happens as you do this. You start with the people who naturally feel close to you. That part's easy, right? But then you get to the outer circles, the people you don't know as well or even at all. That's where the challenge kicks in. How do you treat people in those distant circles with the same kind of warmth, the same level of understanding, as you would your own family? Can you really feel that close to a stranger across the globe? It's a tall order, no doubt, but hierarchals believed you could at least try. And trying, in itself, is part of the exercise. The Stoics were big on this idea of universal brotherhood, and this exercise really taps into that. It nudges you to blur the lines between those circles. Instead of treating someone differently because they're far away in that metaphorical sense, you start to mentally pull them closer, breaking down those artificial barriers we tend to build. And it's not about forcing a sudden bond, but rather a gentle shifting of perspective. You can almost imagine the edges of each circle becoming less defined, like smudges on a page. Over time, as you practice this way of thinking, it's not like you're suddenly going to feel deep affection for every person on the planet. That would be overwhelming and, let's face it, a little unrealistic. But maybe you'll find yourself being just a bit more patient, a bit more understanding, especially with people you don't know or, more importantly, people you might not even like. You start seeing them as part of this larger, interconnected web of humanity, just like you. And once you see that, it's hard to unsee it. The circles keep expanding in your mind. What's also fascinating is how this exercise can shift the way you view yourself. When you're focused on others, your own problems, stresses, and day-to-day frustrations can seem a little smaller, a little more manageable. There's something calming about remembering that you're part of something larger, a vast human network that has been stretching across time and space. You start with your immediate circle, but as you move outward, it's like zooming out on your own life. Everything feels a bit less isolated, more connected. So, when you're feeling stuck in your own world, give this exercise a try. Imagine those circles, and see what happens when you bring people closer in your mind. It's a slow process, sure, but over time, you might find that it changes the way you relate to others and, ultimately, how you relate to yourself. Number 4, view challenges as opportunities for growth. Challenges. Ugh, right? No one really likes them. They're messy, uncomfortable, and often hit when we least expect it. But here's the thing, Stoicism flips the script on challenges. Instead of seeing them as roadblocks or burdens, Stoics view them as golden opportunities for growth. Sounds odd at first, doesn't it? But think about it. Without a little resistance, without something pushing back, how would we ever get stronger? How would we develop resilience, patience, or wisdom? In Stoicism, challenges are more than just things to get through, they're actually the raw material for becoming better. It's not like Stoics are out there chasing hardship for the fun of it. But when it comes their way, they embrace it as a chance to grow. And this mindset? It's a game changer. Imagine you're faced with something tough, something that makes your stomach drop or makes you want to crawl under a blanket and hide. The knee-jerk reaction is usually to avoid it, right? To wish it away or wait for it to pass. But Stoicism asks you to pause. Instead of ducking or wishing things were different, you flip the lens. You ask, how can this challenge serve me? What can I learn here? It's not about pretending the situation is great or that you're thrilled to be dealing with it. That's not the point. The point is, the very act of facing something difficult is what molds you into a stronger version of yourself. Now, seeing challenges as opportunities doesn't mean suddenly loving every struggle. But it's about recognizing that discomfort is often the first step to growth. Just like muscles grow by lifting weights, tension and effort, they need resistance. The same applies to life. When things are easy and smooth, we're coasting, not growing. But when something disrupts that flow, when we're faced with an obstacle, that's where the real work happens. It's in the challenge that you have the chance to sharpen your skills, your mindset, and your character. And it's not just about the big, dramatic challenges. Everyday stuff counts, too. Maybe it's a difficult conversation, a project that's taking way longer than expected, or something as simple as trying to stay calm when you're stuck in a never-ending line. These moments, small as they may seem, are opportunities. They're little chances to practice patience, adaptability, and grit. Stoicism invites you to embrace these moments, not as nuisances, but as tiny stepping stones toward becoming a better, more grounded version of yourself. Another thing Stoicism teaches is that challenges aren't obstacles in the way of life, they are life. They're not interruptions to the flow, they are the flow. That's a subtle but powerful shift in perspective. Instead of seeing a challenge as something getting in the way of your happiness, success, or peace, you start seeing it as the very thing fueling your growth. It's what's pushing you to evolve, to expand your limits. And that's where the magic is. Now, of course, none of this means challenges will suddenly feel easy or enjoyable. They're called challenges for a reason. But when you start to view them as opportunities for growth, something shifts internally. Instead of resisting, you engage. Instead of complaining, you get curious. What's this challenge asking of me? What strength can I cultivate here? Is it patience? Creativity? Emotional resilience? Every challenge asks something of you, and in answering, you grow. So next time something tough pops up, and you've got a choice. You can see it as a burden, something to suffer through, or you can take the Stoic approach and ask, how can this help me grow? That's the beauty of this mindset shift. Suddenly, challenges don't seem so daunting. They become opportunities. Opportunities to practice, to evolve, to become someone who is not just surviving life's hurdles, but thriving because of them. Number 5. Ikigai Reflection. Let's dive into one of those exercises that tends to stir something deep within, Ikigai Reflection. Now, Ikigai is a Japanese concept that's often translated as reason for being. It's this sweet spot where what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can get paid for all intersect. But when you weave that concept into Stoicism, it becomes less about finding a dream job or some ultimate life goal, and more about finding purpose in the everyday, in the here and now. It's not about waiting for some grand, elusive thing to appear and magically make your life meaningful. Instead, it's about uncovering the layers of meaning in what you're already doing. You see, in Stoicism, purpose isn't some fixed destination. It's not a single path that you discover one day and then follow forever without deviation. Purpose, to the Stoic mind, is about living in alignment with nature, embracing your role in the greater scheme of things, and cultivating virtue every single day. That's where the Ikigai Reflection comes in. It's like hitting pause on the chaos and asking yourself some very honest questions. What am I really doing with my time? What brings me a sense of fulfillment? And am I living in a way that contributes positively to the world around me? When you start reflecting on your own Ikigai through the lens of Stoicism, you're not chasing some perfect alignment of passion, skill, and external reward. Instead, you're seeking clarity. You're looking at your actions, your thoughts, and your daily life and asking, does this make me better? Does it bring me closer to living a life that's in tune with my deeper values? Here's where things get a bit tricky. This reflection isn't about finding immediate answers or definitive conclusions. It's more like peeling back layers. Maybe today you realize, hey, I've been focusing way too much on things outside of my control. Or perhaps you notice that a lot of your energy is going into pursuits that don't really align with what matters to you. That's okay. In fact, that's part of the process. It's not about beating yourself up for past decisions or wasted time. Stoicism teaches us to approach life with compassion, towards others and towards ourselves. So, if your reflection reveals areas where you feel disconnected or off track, view that as an opportunity. It's a chance to recalibrate, to realign. What makes this practice so powerful is that it encourages ongoing self-awareness. You're not just reflecting once and then moving on. The Stoics believe that life is a constant practice of tuning your mind, examining your motivations, and adjusting your actions. Ikigai Reflection asks you to do just that, but with a focus on finding where your purpose lies, right now, in this moment, with the tools and talents you already have. Another thing to remember, this isn't about external validation. Stoicism emphasizes the importance of inner virtues like wisdom, courage, and justice. Your Ikigai isn't dependent on recognition, applause, or rewards from the outside world. It's about that quiet sense of knowing you're living in a way that aligns with who you want to be. It's that feeling of satisfaction that comes from within, even if no one else notices what you're doing. The beauty of this reflection is that it doesn't ask you to drastically change your life overnight. It's not about quitting your job or moving to some exotic place to find yourself. It's about recognizing that purpose can be found in the ordinary moments, if you choose to see it. You can find meaning in a conversation, in a task well done, in helping someone without expecting anything in return. And when you start to connect those dots, those small, seemingly insignificant actions, you begin to realize that your purpose isn't out there somewhere waiting to be found. It's been here all along, woven into the fabric of your daily life. So, take some time to reflect. What are you doing that brings you a sense of peace, or fulfillment, or connection to something greater? What areas of your life could you tweak to align more with your values? Ikigai Reflection isn't about nailing down the perfect answer, it's about staying curious and open, and letting your purpose unfold as you continue your Stoic journey. Number 6. Focus on process, not outcome. let's talk about one of the trickiest but most powerful concepts in Stoicism, focusing on the process, not the outcome. It's a complete mindset shift, one that can really flip how you look at success and failure. Now, we all love results, right? We're wired that way. There's a certain rush in hitting that goal, getting that reward, nailing that outcome. It feels good. It's satisfying. But here's the thing, Stoicism suggests we dial down the obsession with the end result and instead, zoom in on the process itself. And yeah, that's easier said than done, but stick with me. At its heart, this practice is about detaching from things you can't fully control. You can control your effort, your attitude, your actions, but you can't always control what happens after that. You might pour your heart into something, do everything right, but the outcome? That could still go sideways. And that's where frustration sneaks in. The Stoics would tell you to expect that. They'd remind you that the outcome is never fully in your hands, and the sooner you let go of trying to dictate it, the better you'll feel. So, how do you actually start focusing on the process? It's all about being in the present moment, paying attention to what you're doing right now. Let's say you're working on something challenging. Instead of constantly thinking, is this going to work? Will it pay off? What if it fails? Shift your attention to the steps you're taking at this very second. How are you approaching the task? Are you giving it your best shot? Are you learning something along the way? That's what matters. The Stoics knew that by focusing on the process, you're actually giving yourself more freedom. Why? Because you're no longer tied down by the weight of expectations. You're no longer at the mercy of things beyond your control, and that's liberating. The process becomes its own reward. You start to notice small wins along the way you grow, the skills you sharpen, the calm you develop in sticking with something even when the results are uncertain. You shift from, did I succeed, to did I give it my best effort? Here's a fun part of all this. Paradoxically, when you let go of the outcome, you often end up performing better. Why? Because you're less stressed, less anxious about what might or might not happen. You're more focused on the here and now, which makes your work more deliberate, more thoughtful. You're not rushing to the finish line, you're fully engaged in each step along the way. You find flow. And when you're in that flow, the results often take care of themselves. That doesn't mean you don't care about results at all. Of course, you want good outcomes. But you approach them differently. You set your intention, you do what's within your power, and then, here's the hard part, you let go. You trust the process. The Stoics understood that worrying endlessly about results is not only unhelpful, it's exhausting. You'll burn yourself out chasing after things that aren't always yours to control. But if you focus on the process, you're always in control of that. This practice requires patience. It's not something that clicks overnight. We've all been conditioned to judge our efforts based on what we get in the end, whether it's a tangible reward or recognition. But when you switch gears and give your attention to the process itself, you start to realize that's where the real growth happens. The outcome is just the cherry on top. So next time you find yourself caught up in where you're going, take a breath and ask yourself, how can I be present in what I'm doing right now? Shift your focus, enjoy the journey, and let the results fall where they may. Number 7, remind yourself of the impermanence of things. Let's talk about one of those heavy, but oddly freeing ideas in Stoicism, impermanence. Yeah, that thing no one really wants to think about. The fact that everything, our moments, our stuff, our achievements, even the people around us, is temporary. Sounds a bit harsh, right? But wait. There's something liberating about it, too. When you really wrap your head around the idea that nothing lasts forever, life starts to feel different. Lighter, even. At first glance, the impermanence of things might seem depressing. Why bother with anything if it's all just going to fade away eventually? But that's where Stoicism flips the script. Instead of dwelling on the inevitable end, you use impermanence as a reminder to value what's here now. It's not about ignoring the fact that things change or disappear, but about seeing that very fact as a reason to be more present, more grateful, more engaged in the moment. Here's the thing, we tend to hold onto things tightly. We cling to routines, possessions, and relationships as if they're unshakable, permanent fixtures in our lives. But deep down, we know they aren't. Life is constantly shifting, whether we like it or not. Nothing stays exactly the same. And that's actually a good thing, even if it doesn't always feel like it. Stoicism encourages you to embrace that impermanence, not fight it. After all, change is the only real constant we have. So how does reminding yourself of impermanence help? Well, for one, it puts things into perspective. Those little irritations, the setbacks, even the bigger challenges, they don't seem quite so overwhelming when you realize they're temporary. That bad day? It'll pass. The argument you had? It'll fade. When you remind yourself that nothing lasts forever, you start to see how fleeting most of our daily concerns really are. It gives you permission to stop sweating the small stuff. But it goes deeper than that. Impermanence also serves as a wake-up call to appreciate what's in front of you, right now. When you recognize that everything you experience is transient, you start to see the beauty in it. That morning coffee you have every day. One day, it'll be your last cup. Not to sound grim, but it makes you savor it a bit more, doesn't it? You start to appreciate the little things, knowing they won't always be there. It's about finding joy and meaning in the present, because the present is really all you've got. Of course, the same goes for the people in your life. When you remind yourself of their impermanence, how they, too, are here for only a finite time, it encourages you to be more mindful of your interactions. You start to let go of petty frustrations, realizing they're not worth the limited time you have with someone. Instead, you focus on the connection, the moments of kindness, the shared experiences. Stoicism teaches us that impermanence isn't something to fear. It's something to accept and, more importantly, to use. By recognizing that everything around us is in a constant state of change, we can live more fully. We can appreciate what's good, let go of what's bad, and stop getting so attached to things that, in the grand scheme of things, are just passing through. So, next time you find yourself caught up in the rush of life, take a moment. Remind yourself that this too, whatever it is, won't last. And that's okay. In fact, it's more than okay, it's what makes life rich and meaningful. Everything is in motion, always. And the more we can embrace that, the more we can find peace in the present, and appreciate the ride while it lasts. Number 8. Walking meditation. Walking and meditation? It might sound like a contradiction at first. Isn't meditation all about sitting still and clearing your mind? Not in Stoicism. Here, it's not just about retreating from the world to find peace, but learning how to engage with it mindfully, even while in motion. Walking meditation is one of the most accessible ways to blend action with introspection, and it's a perfect Stoic exercise to cultivate awareness, focus, and inner calm without needing to lock yourself away in a quiet room. So, what exactly is walking meditation? It's simple, yet surprisingly profound. Imagine yourself moving through the world, but instead of walking automatically, you become acutely aware of each step, each breath, and each sensation. Every time your foot hits the ground, it becomes an anchor to the present moment. You're no longer rushing from point A to point B. Instead, you're walking with intention, fully aware of your surroundings but detached from distractions. It's like hitting pause on the constant stream of thoughts that usually dominates your mind. Now, here's the thing, when you start practicing walking meditation, don't expect your thoughts to magically disappear. They won't. And that's okay. In fact, Stoicism doesn't ask you to empty your mind. Instead, it encourages you to observe your thoughts, like clouds passing across the sky. They're there, but you don't have to chase them or get caught up in them. Walking meditation gives you the space to witness them without being swept away by them. As you walk, notice the sensation of your feet pressing into the earth. Feel the breeze against your skin. Pay attention to the rhythm of your breath. These might sound like small things, but in Stoicism, the small things matter. Every moment is an opportunity to practice awareness and presence. The simple act of walking, something you do every day without thinking, becomes a powerful tool for cultivating mindfulness and grounding yourself in the present. There's a kind of magic that happens when you do this. Suddenly, your mind stops racing ahead to the future or getting stuck in the past. You're here, now. Each step becomes a reminder of the Stoic principle to live in the moment and not be ruled by worries or regrets. That doesn't mean ignoring the future or dismissing the past entirely. It's more about understanding that the only moment you truly have is the one you're in. And here's the beauty of walking meditation: you can do it anywhere. Whether you're in a quiet park or a bustling city street, it doesn't matter. The practice is internal. Sure, there might be distractions, cars honking, people chatting, maybe a loud dog barking, but Stoicism teaches us not to be derailed by what's outside our control. Those distractions? Let them be. Acknowledge them, and then return to your steps. It's this continuous practice of refocusing that strengthens your mental resilience. One of the coolest things about walking meditation is how it connects you to the world around you. In Stoicism, we talk a lot about being part of the greater whole, seeing yourself as a single thread in the fabric of the universe. When you walk mindfully, you start to feel that connection more deeply. You're not just moving through the world, you're part of it. You're aware of the ground beneath you, the air you're breathing, the life unfolding all around you. It's a humbling and expansive feeling, this sense that you're both small and significant at the same time. And don't get caught up in trying to do it perfectly. Walking meditation, like all Stoic practices, isn't about mastering some rigid technique. It's about showing up and being present with whatever comes up. Some days, you might feel completely in tune with your surroundings, and other days, your mind might wander constantly. That's fine. It's the practice itself that matters, the effort to be present, the intention to engage with life mindfully. So, the next time you head out for a walk, whether it's for 5 minutes or an hour, give this a try. Slow down. Breathe deeply. Feel your steps. Notice the world around you without judgment, without rushing to get anywhere. Just walk. And in that walking, you'll find a quiet space within yourself, a space that Stoicism encourages you to cultivate, a space where you can practice the art of living, one step at a time. Number 9. Break down big tasks into small steps. Alright, so let's dive into one of the simplest yet most effective Stoic exercises: breaking down big tasks into smaller, more manageable steps. It sounds almost too easy, right? But, trust me, there's a reason this is such a cornerstone in Stoic thinking. The idea is to avoid that overwhelming feeling when you're staring at something huge and intimidating, the kind of task that makes you want to crawl under a blanket and pretend it doesn't exist. We've all been there, seeing that mountain of work and thinking, how am I ever going to get through this? That's where this technique comes in. It's about taking that mountain and chipping away at it, bit by bit. So, imagine you've got this giant task looming over you. Maybe it feels like a monster, like something that's going to swallow up all your time and energy. It's easy to get paralyzed by the sheer size of it. Your mind starts racing ahead, thinking about how long it's going to take, all the potential roadblocks, everything that could go wrong. Suddenly, it's not just the task itself that's stressful, it's all the thoughts swirling around it. The Stoics would say, whoa, slow down. Focus on what's in front of you, right now. The key here is to zoom in, narrow your focus. Instead of thinking about the entire task in one big, scary chunk, break it down into smaller, more manageable pieces. Tiny steps, even. That monster of a project? It's just a collection of smaller tasks strung together. And when you start looking at it that way, it stops being quite so overwhelming. You're not trying to tackle the whole thing at once, you're just handling one small piece at a time. It's like chopping up a giant puzzle. You're focusing on one piece, and then the next, and slowly but surely, it starts to come together. But here's the catch, it's not just about breaking things down for the sake of feeling less overwhelmed. The Stoics want you to actually focus on each step as its own little victory. Each small action is something you can control. You can't control how long the entire project will take, but you can control what you do today, in this moment. That's the Stoic mindset, control what's within your grasp, and don't get lost worrying about the rest. What's interesting about this approach is that it's not just about productivity. Sure, breaking things down helps you get things done, but there's something deeper here. By focusing on these smaller steps, you're training your mind to stay present, to be mindful of what you're doing right now rather than getting caught up in future anxieties. You stop stressing about how far away the finish line is and instead appreciate the progress you're making in each moment. And let's not forget, tackling things this way also gives you momentum. Once you complete one small step, there's a kind of psychological boost, this feeling of, hey, I did that. I can do the next one too. Each little win propels you forward. Before you know it, you're chipping away at the bigger task without even realizing it. It becomes less about conquering the whole mountain and more about enjoying the climb, one step at a time. Now, I know this might seem overly simple at first glance. But that's the beauty of it, it is simple, and that's what makes it work. The Stoics weren't about overcomplicating things. They understood that big, daunting tasks are just a series of small, manageable actions. When you focus on those actions, the task stops being a source of dread and starts becoming something you can actually engage with. One small step, then another, and another. So next time you're staring down something massive, don't get caught up in the size of it. Break it down. Focus on one small piece. And trust that by doing so, you'll eventually get where you need to go, one manageable step at a time. Number 10, mindful eating. Let's face it, eating is something we often rush through without a second thought. We grab a bite, scroll through our phones, and before we know it, the meal's over and we're already thinking about the next thing. But Stoicism has a little gem tucked away when it comes to something as everyday as eating, mindfulness. You've probably heard of mindful eating before, but how does it fit into Stoicism, and what does it really mean to eat mindfully? First off, mindful eating in the Stoic sense isn't some complicated practice. It's not about following strict rules or turning your meal into a big, ritualistic event. It's more about bringing your attention back to the simple act of eating, something that we often do on autopilot. Stoicism is all about awareness and intention, and that applies to everything, even the way you consume food. When you sit down to eat, the idea is to really be there, fully present with your food, not distracted or zoned out. It's a way to practice being in the moment, which is a cornerstone of Stoic philosophy. Now, what does that look like? Well, it starts with noticing. Noticing the food on your plate, the colors, the smells, the textures. We tend to just dive in without paying attention, but what if you paused for a second? What if you took the time to actually appreciate the food in front of you, not in a dramatic or exaggerated way, but just a moment of recognition? You're not just shoveling something into your mouth, you're engaging with it. This food is fueling your body, it's part of your day, your life. Stoicism invites you to respect that process, even if it's something as simple as a piece of bread. And here's the thing, mindful eating can also be a practice of restraint, another key Stoic principle. It's about knowing when enough is enough. Stoicism isn't about denying yourself pleasure, but it does ask you to be mindful of excess. Eating just to eat, without really paying attention, often leads to overindulgence. We eat out of boredom, stress, or habit, rather than out of genuine hunger or need. A Stoic approach would encourage you to tune into your body, to eat when you're hungry and stop when you're full, no mindless snacking, no overeating just because the food is there. It's about moderation, balance, and being intentional with what and how much you consume. But there's more to it than just what's on the plate. Mindful eating also involves gratitude. Stoics believed in appreciating what's in front of you without taking it for granted. When you eat mindfully, you're not just fueling your body, you're acknowledging the effort, the resources, and the time that went into providing that meal. It's about feeling a quiet sense of thanks, not in a showy or performative way, but just a simple, internal recognition. You realize that the food you're eating didn't appear out of thin air. You appreciate its presence in your life. Finally, mindful eating can be a practice in self-control. You're not just mindlessly reaching for more. Instead, you're practicing restraint, savoring each bite, and recognizing when it's time to stop. And when you eat mindfully, you're more likely to choose foods that nourish and sustain you rather than those that simply fill a void. You make decisions based on what your body needs, not on impulse or craving. So, next time you sit down for a meal, challenge yourself to slow down. Take a breath, notice the food in front of you, and eat with intention. It's a small but powerful way to incorporate Stoicism into your daily life, a practice that not only benefits your body but sharpens your mind. After all, in a world that's constantly pulling us in different directions, bringing mindfulness to something as basic as eating can ground you in the present and remind you of the simple things that matter. Thanks so much for watching. I hope these 10 Stoic exercises gave you some practical tools to start your journey into Stoicism. Remember, it's all about progress, not perfection. In the last section, let's go over Stoic rules to ensure everyone respects you. Number 1. Speak less, listen more. Speak less, listen more is one of those principles that sounds simple, but it's incredibly powerful. It's not just about keeping your mouth shut for the sake of it. It's about creating space. Space for others to feel heard, valued, and respected. When you're talking all the time, you're not just filling the air with words, you're missing out on the chance to actually connect with people. Here's the thing, everyone loves to feel like what they're saying matters, but not everyone gets that kind of attention. When you speak less, people notice. It's almost like there's a mystery about you. They want to hear from you, but they have to wait for it, and that builds a sense of intrigue. You're not giving away everything at once. The person who holds back a little has control over the conversation without dominating it. You're creating a dynamic where when you finally do say something, people are more likely to lean in and really listen. They know your words carry weight, and that makes them respect what you have to say. But let's talk about the other half of this, listening. True listening is an underrated superpower. And I mean really listening, not just waiting for your turn to talk. You know the difference, right? There's a kind of listening where you're nodding along, but in your head, you're already crafting your response. Then there's the kind of listening where you're so dialed in, you're actually processing and absorbing what the other person is saying. That's the kind that leaves an impression. When you listen deeply, people feel understood. They feel like their words matter to you. That simple act of listening changes the entire vibe of the interaction. It's a mutual exchange of respect. When someone feels heard, they naturally respect you more because you've shown them something valuable, you've given them your attention, which, let's be honest, is something we don't always get enough of these days. Listening also gives you an edge. People reveal so much in what they say, and in what they don't say. You pick up on cues, subtext, emotions that others miss. The person who speaks less and listens more tends to be more aware of the room, the mood, and the people in it. You gain insight not just into what's being discussed, but how it's being discussed. This heightened awareness allows you to respond thoughtfully when you do speak, further elevating the respect others have for you. It also helps you avoid saying something you might regret. How many times have we blurted out something in the heat of the moment only to wish we had taken a beat? By staying quiet and listening first, you give yourself the time to consider your words carefully. It's a way of showing self-control and maturity, two qualities that others naturally respect. So yeah, speaking less and listening more isn't just about keeping quiet for the sake of it. It's about being intentional with your words and giving others the space to feel heard. It's a subtle shift in how you engage with people, but the respect and attention you gain from it, that can be a game changer. Number 2, keep your word. Keeping your word, such a simple concept, but it's a game changer when it comes to how people see you. It's more than just doing what you say you'll do. It's about showing others that you are dependable, that your promises aren't empty words just floating around. Think of it as a quiet superpower. People often overpromise and underdeliver, and that's where you can stand out by doing the opposite. The more you follow through, the more others take you seriously. It's like building a reputation brick by brick. When you keep your word, you're saying to people, "Hey, I respect your time and your trust." And in return, they start valuing your time too. It's like a silent agreement: you treat people right, and they'll do the same for you. There's something magnetic about a person who doesn't flake or back out. They become the type of person others naturally want to prioritize. Why? Because reliability is rare. And when something is rare, people gravitate toward it. But here's the kicker: it's not always easy to stick to what you say. Life happens. Things get in the way. Maybe you've overbooked yourself, or you just don't feel like following through on that commitment you made a week ago. We've all been there. However, this is exactly where Stoic wisdom comes into play. You've got to train your mind to treat your word as gold, no matter what. The Stoics teach us that our character is built on what we consistently do, not what we occasionally say. You might think, it's just one little thing, no one will care. But the truth is, people do notice. Even if it's subconscious, they'll clock whether you followed through or not. It's the small actions that add up over time. If you're someone who constantly shows up when you say you will, people will remember. They'll respect you for it. And guess what? When people respect you, they naturally prioritize you in their own lives. Now, keeping your word doesn't mean overloading yourself. If you've committed to too much, it's better to renegotiate or be honest up front rather than let someone down later. The key is transparency. There's no harm in saying, "I thought I could, but I need to adjust." People appreciate honesty far more than broken promises. It's when you say nothing and then fail to deliver that the respect begins to crumble. Here's another layer to this: when you keep your word to others, you're also keeping it to yourself. Each time you follow through, you're reinforcing your own self-discipline. It feels good, doesn't it? To know that you can trust yourself. It's like an internal compass pointing you toward a more centered, grounded version of yourself. And others feel that energy too. In the end, keeping your word is more than just checking off a box on your to-do list. It's about building trust, respect, and a solid reputation that makes people see you differently. It's a ripple effect that touches every part of your life, and it all starts with a simple commitment: say what you mean what you say, and then do it. Number 3, view insults as reflections of the insulter. When someone throws an insult your way, the first instinct might be to feel offended or hurt. That sting you feel? Totally normal. But here's the thing: insults are rarely about you. They're usually a reflection of what's going on with the person throwing them. Think about it: Why would someone feel the need to bring another person down unless they're battling their own insecurities, frustrations, or issues? Stoicism teaches us to view insults in a detached way, to step back and see them for what they are, an expression of the insulter's internal world, not a statement of who we are. When someone insults you, they're showing you more about themselves than they are about you. It's like holding up a mirror to their own mindset, not yours. Let's break it down. When a person lashes out, they might be projecting their own fears, doubts, or feelings of inadequacy. Maybe they're frustrated with something unrelated, but instead of dealing with that directly, they choose to channel that energy towards someone else. You're just in the line of fire. It's like someone dropping a glass and blaming the floor for it breaking. The glass was bound to fall, and the insult was bound to come out, but it doesn't mean the floor, or you, had anything to do with it. Now, think about the power dynamics here. If you get upset or flustered by an insult, you're giving them control over your emotions. You're letting them dictate how you feel. But if you can see their insult as just noise, as a reflection of their own struggles, then you take that power back. Their words lose their sting. They become just words. A breeze passing by. One of the reasons insults can feel so personal is because we're wired to seek approval. We want to be liked, respected, and acknowledged. But when you understand that insults often have nothing to do with you, you can step outside of that need for validation. Someone calling you names doesn't change your worth. It doesn't diminish who you are. If anything, it tells you that the other person is the one struggling with their own self-worth. Of course, this doesn't mean you should dismiss every bit of criticism or feedback that comes your way. There's a difference between constructive criticism and a straight-up insult. Stoicism encourages us to be open to feedback that can help us grow, but we should be discerning. If the intent behind someone's words is just to hurt or bring you down, you don't have to take it on board. You can choose what to accept and what to let go of. And here's the kicker: once you start seeing insults as a reflection of the other person, they stop bothering you. You might even feel a sense of compassion or pity for the insulter. After all, they're clearly dealing with something if they feel the need to strike out at someone else. Instead of letting their words penetrate, you can stay centered, grounded in the knowledge that their insults are just echoes of their own inner turmoil. In the end, insults don't define you. How you respond to them does. And when you respond with calmness, confidence, and the understanding that it's really about them and not you, you'll find that people respect you more. They'll see that you're not easily rattled, that you stand firm in who you are. That kind of quiet strength commands respect without you having to demand it. Number 4, avoid gossip and idle talk. Gossip and idle talk, it's so easy to slip into, right? You're in a conversation, and before you know it, the topic turns to someone else's life, their drama, their mistakes. It can feel harmless, even fun, to speculate or trade stories about what so-and-so is up to. But here's the thing: when you engage in gossip or meaningless chatter, you're wasting more than just time. You're eroding trust, your own credibility, and the respect others have for you. Think about it for a second. When people hear you gossiping, what are they really thinking? Sure, they might join in, laugh along, or even add their own bits to the conversation, but in the back of their mind, there's a voice saying, if they talk about others like this, what do they say about me when I'm not around? It plants a seed of doubt, a feeling that they can't fully trust you. And trust is the foundation of respect. When you stay out of gossip, you send a different kind of message. You show that you value integrity, that you're not interested in tearing others down behind their backs just for the sake of filling a conversation. People will notice that you don't engage in that low-level chatter, and they'll respect you for it, even if they don't say it out loud. It sets you apart, in a quiet but powerful way. Now, let's talk about idle talk, the kind of empty conversation that doesn't really go anywhere. We all know what that feels like. It's those surface-level exchanges about nothing that just pass the time. There's nothing wrong with small talk here and there, but if your conversations are always shallow or aimless, people may start to feel like there's no depth to you. And if there's no depth, there's nothing to respect. By avoiding idle talk, you make room for conversations that actually matter. When you speak, it becomes clear that you're saying something worth hearing. You're not just filling the air with empty words. You're bringing thoughtfulness, focus, and intention to what you say. And that's refreshing, because in a world full of noise, people crave something real, something meaningful. When you're the one who brings that to the table, you stand out. And here's another layer to it. When you rise above gossip and avoid the fluff, you protect your own energy. Gossip, in particular, is a form of negativity that drains both the person talking and the person listening. It shifts the energy of a conversation toward judgment, comparison, and even envy. That's a toxic vibe. But when you stay away from that and focus on things that uplift or at least stay neutral, you're maintaining a sense of calm and control. People feel that from you. It's almost like a quiet strength, and they're drawn to it. Avoiding gossip and idle talk is also a kind of discipline. It takes effort not to get pulled into those easy conversations that go nowhere. But when you practice that discipline, people see you as someone who has their priorities straight, someone who values their time and energy. That's the kind of person others naturally respect. So, next time you feel the pull toward gossip or meaningless chatter, pause. Ask yourself, is this conversation adding value? If it's not, maybe it's time to steer it somewhere else or just stay quiet. Because at the end of the day, the words you choose to speak or not speak say a lot about the kind of person you are. And the person who rises above the noise, that's the one who commands respect. Number 5. Deliberately lower your expectations in relationships. When it comes to relationships, we all tend to carry around a suitcase full of expectations, some spoken, some unspoken. We expect people to show up for us, to treat us a certain way, to understand us without having to say a word. But here's the thing, when those expectations aren't met, we feel disappointed, maybe even hurt. And that's exactly where Stoic thinking can swoop in to save the day. The idea of deliberately lowering your expectations might sound counterintuitive at first. You might be thinking, why should I expect less from people I care about? But let's dig into that. Expectations are tricky because, more often than not, they're based on assumptions. We assume that others will act, speak, or react in ways we believe are right or fair. But everyone has their own way of doing things, their own set of priorities, their own struggles. When we expect too much from people, we set ourselves up for disappointment. By consciously lowering our expectations, we give ourselves the freedom to enjoy relationships as they are, not as we think they should be. Now, don't get it twisted. Lowering your expectations doesn't mean lowering your standards or accepting bad behavior. It's not about becoming a doormat or putting up with disrespect. It's more about managing your emotional investment in other people's actions. You stop tying your happiness or satisfaction to what others do or don't do. In doing so, you take back control over your emotional state. You're no longer thrown off when someone doesn't act the way you hoped or expected. It's like a cushion for your mind, a buffer against unnecessary frustration. Think of it like this: if you expect someone to always text back immediately and they don't, you might feel slighted or anxious. But if you approach the relationship with fewer demands, the delayed response won't sting as much. You'll feel more at peace because you've detached your happiness from their behavior. That's where real freedom comes in. The Stoics would call it amor fati, loving what happens, accepting things as they are, not how you wish them to be. Lowering your expectations also opens the door to more appreciation. When you don't expect much, the things people do for you feel more like gifts than obligations. It's a shift in perspective. Suddenly, the little gestures become more meaningful. You start noticing the good things rather than fixating on what's lacking. The pressure dissolves. Relationships become lighter, less burdensome, and, surprisingly, more fulfilling. And here's a little secret: when you lower your expectations, others start respecting you more. Why? Because they feel less judged, less scrutinized. They're free to be themselves around you. And that's magnetic. People like being around those who don't constantly need them to fit into a mold. In return, they're more likely to prioritize and respect you, not because you expect them to, but because they want to. So, by deliberately lowering your expectations, you're not giving up on people, you're giving them the space to be human. And in that space, respect has the room to grow naturally, without the weight of demands or disappointment. It's a subtle shift, but one that can bring you more peace and better connections. Number 6. Practice being anonymous to reduce ego. In a world where everyone's trying to stand out, grab attention, and make their mark, practicing anonymity sounds a bit counterintuitive, doesn't it? But that's exactly what makes it so powerful. The idea of intentionally stepping back, blending into the background, and letting go of the need to be recognized can feel weird at first, but it's a game changer when it comes to reducing ego. Here's why: when you're constantly seeking the spotlight, your ego gets bigger and bigger. You start to crave recognition and validation from others. It becomes less about what you're actually doing and more about how people perceive you. You want the applause, the likes, the comments, the pats on the back. And while that attention might feel good in the moment, it's a bit of a trap. Because once you get used to it, you start needing it. Your sense of self-worth becomes tied to how much people notice and praise you. The problem? That kind of validation is fleeting and totally out of your control. But when you practice being anonymous, it's like taking a deep breath and letting all that need for validation go. You start doing things just for the sake of doing them, without caring whether anyone's watching. It's incredibly freeing. You'll find that when you're not trying to impress anyone, you actually enjoy things more. The pressure's off. It's just you and whatever you're working on, without the extra weight of worrying about what other people think. And here's the twist: when you stop needing the spotlight, people often start to notice you even more. There's something about someone who doesn't chase attention that naturally draws people in. It's like they sense that quiet confidence, that ability to just do your thing without seeking approval. Ironically, the less you try to be seen, the more you stand out in a world full of people trying so hard to be noticed. But beyond that, practicing anonymity keeps your ego in check. Ego loves attention, loves being the center of things. When you intentionally remove yourself from that equation, your ego starts to shrink. You start seeing yourself as just one small part of something bigger. You realize that not everything revolves around you, and honestly, that's a relief. The pressure to constantly be on fades, and you can focus on what really matters. Being anonymous is also a great way to learn humility. When you're not the star of the show, you're reminded that the world doesn't owe you recognition. It humbles you in the best possible way. You become more grounded, more in tune with the people around you, because you're not wrapped up in how you're being perceived. You become less reactive, less desperate for approval, and much more content with simply being. And maybe that's the ultimate goal, to find contentment in the act of doing, rather than in the applause that follows. Practicing anonymity allows you to strip away the layers of ego and be okay with being unnoticed. It's a subtle but powerful shift that brings a deeper sense of peace and focus. You're no longer performing for an audience, you're just living. At the end of the day, the more you let go of the need to be seen, the more people will respect you. There's something compelling about someone who can work quietly, without the need for constant recognition. It shows strength, self-assurance, and a deep understanding that your worth isn't determined by how many people are clapping for you. Number 7. Maintain your integrity. Maintaining your integrity sounds like one of those things we all think we do, but when life gets messy or the pressure's on, it can be surprisingly easy to slip. Integrity isn't just about being honest or doing the right thing when it's convenient. It's about sticking to your values, even when no one's watching, even when doing so might make things a little more difficult for you in the short term. It's like an internal compass that always points you in the right direction, if you choose to follow it. People notice when you hold yourself to a higher standard. They might not always say it, but they feel it. It's the way you handle tricky situations, how you treat people, especially those who can't do anything for you. When you maintain your integrity, it's not just about big, dramatic moments where you're tested. It's about those quiet, everyday choices. Do you take the easy route and cut corners, or do you stick to your principles, even if it's a bit more work? That's the real test. What's interesting is that when you live with integrity, you send out a subtle signal that people pick up on, almost instinctively. They begin to see you as someone reliable, someone who can be trusted, because you're consistent. And that kind of consistency is rare. It's easy to say you're going to do the right thing, but actually doing it, especially when it's hard or unpopular, that's a different story. And that's why people respect those who stay true to themselves. Integrity isn't about being perfect, though. It's not some lofty ideal where you never make a mistake. We're all human, and we all mess up from time to time. The difference is how you handle it when things go sideways. Do you own up to your mistakes, take responsibility, and learn from them? Or do you try to cover them up, shift the blame, or pretend like nothing happened? The way you respond when things don't go according to plan says a lot about your character, and people are always paying attention to that. The funny thing about integrity is that, in the long run, it makes life simpler. You don't have to worry about keeping up with lies, or getting caught in a web of half-truths, because you've stayed true to who you are. When you're consistent in your actions and decisions, people know what to expect from you, and that creates a sense of stability. They trust you, not just because of what you say, but because of what you do, repeatedly, over time. And when people trust you, they naturally respect you. They prioritize your opinions, your time, and your presence, because they know you're someone who stands by their word. It's that consistency, that unwavering sense of who you are, that sets you apart. When you maintain your integrity, you don't have to demand respect, it just follows. At the end of the day, maintaining your integrity isn't always the easiest path, but it's the one that leads to long-lasting respect. It's about showing up as your true self, every time, no matter the situation. And that kind of authenticity? It's magnetic. People can't help but notice. And they'll value you all the more for it. Number 8, control your emotions. Emotions, those wild, unpredictable waves that can knock us off balance if we're not careful. One minute you're calm, the next you're fired up over something someone said or didn't say. It's human, right? But here's the thing, letting your emotions control you is like handing over the keys to your life. And if we're talking about earning respect and getting people to prioritize you, learning to control those emotions is a total game changer. Now, don't get me wrong. Controlling your emotions doesn't mean shutting them down or pretending they don't exist. You're not a robot, and no one's expecting you to be. But if you let every feeling, every irritation, every anger spike dictate your actions, people will start to see you as unstable, even unpredictable. It's hard to respect someone who's always in reactive mode. They'll step around you carefully, not because they respect you, but because they're afraid of setting you off. That's not the kind of energy you want to put out into the world. You want people to feel safe around you, knowing that you won't lose your cool at the slightest inconvenience. So, how do you do it? How do you stop letting your emotions run the show? The Stoics had a great approach to this. It all starts in the mind. Before the emotions take hold, there's a thought. Something happens, someone cuts you off in a conversation, for example, and you get that flash of irritation. It's that split second between stimulus and response where the magic happens. In that moment, you get to decide, do I let this consume me, or do I take a step back and breathe? That's where the power lies. It's not easy, though. In fact, it's a lifelong practice. But here's the cool part, the more you practice, the better you get at catching yourself before your emotions take over. You start becoming the master of your own reactions. And when you're in control of your emotions, you come across as composed, grounded, steady. That's the kind of energy people respect. They see you as someone who doesn't get rattled easily, someone who can handle tough situations without falling apart. They'll start looking up to you, maybe even leaning on you when they need some calm in their own chaos. Another benefit? When you control your emotions, you're no longer at the mercy of other people's actions. You stop giving away your power to things you can't control. You become unshakable, and others notice that. They notice that they can't push your buttons so easily, and that makes them respect you more. You're not over here reacting to everything thrown your way. Instead, you're choosing your battles, staying cool under pressure, and making decisions from a place of clarity, not chaos. That kind of emotional control makes people prioritize you because they know they can rely on you to keep your head when things get intense. It's the kind of calm that draws people in, the type of energy that commands respect. So, the next time you feel your emotions starting to bubble up, take that pause. That one breath might just be the difference between letting your emotions control you and you controlling them. And when you do, you'll find that others naturally begin to see you in a whole new light, steady, respected, and worth prioritizing. Number 9, accept discomfort as growth. Discomfort. It's one of those things we all try to dodge, right? No one wakes up thinking, I'd love to feel uneasy or struggle today. But here's the thing, discomfort is where growth happens. And if you want people to prioritize and respect you, you've got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Sounds strange, but stick with me. When we face discomfort, whether it's physical, emotional, or mental, it's a signal that something is shifting. Something's changing. Growth doesn't come from hanging out in your comfort zone, doing the same old routine day in and day out. That's just maintaining. Real growth comes from those moments when you're stretched, when things feel uncertain, and when you're pushed beyond your usual limits. It's like your mind and body saying, hey, we're leveling up here. Let's be honest, though, discomfort sucks. It's messy. It makes you question yourself, your choices, and sometimes even the point of it all. But if you can learn to sit with that discomfort, to embrace it as part of the process, you'll come out stronger on the other side. And the more you embrace discomfort, the less it actually phases you over time. It's like a muscle you're training. At first, it hurts, but after a while, you get stronger. What used to feel impossible becomes manageable. What once scared you now just feels like another challenge. This mindset shift is key when it comes to earning respect from others. People notice when you can handle pressure, when you don't crumble at the first sign of difficulty. They respect someone who can stand firm, even when things aren't going their way. It shows resilience, which is a trait that commands admiration without you having to demand it. Discomfort also brings clarity. When you're uncomfortable, you're forced to pay attention. You can't coast. You've got to assess, adapt, and figure out a way forward. In those moments, you learn more about yourself than you ever would when everything's going smoothly. You discover your limits, your strengths, and how much you're really capable of handling. Spoiler, it's usually way more than you think. Now, here's where Stoicism really comes into play. A lot of discomfort comes from resisting what's happening. We get stressed or anxious because we're fighting against reality. Stoicism teaches us to accept things as they are. If you stop resisting discomfort and instead lean into it, it loses its grip on you. You realize that discomfort isn't this big, bad thing to be avoided at all costs. It's just part of life, part of the human experience. And when you stop viewing it as a threat, it becomes less daunting. You'll also notice something interesting. The more you accept discomfort, the more grounded you feel. You're no longer thrown off by every challenge or setback. People pick up on that. They see someone who can weather the storm, who doesn't shy away from tough situations. That kind of calm in the face of adversity? That's powerful. And people respect it deeply. So, next time you feel that discomfort creeping in, don't panic. Don't run from it. Accept it. Sit with it. Let it teach you something. Because on the other side of that discomfort is growth. And with growth comes confidence, resilience, and yes, respect. Number 10. Imagine living as though today were your last day. Imagine waking up in the morning with the thought, what if today was my last day? It's not a gloomy or morbid exercise, it's actually about being alive in the truest sense. It's about making the most of the present moment, squeezing the juice out of every hour, and letting go of the distractions and nonsense that usually cloud your day. When you carry this mindset, things start to shift. Your priorities become sharper, your time feels more precious, and suddenly, the stuff that used to stress you out, it doesn't feel so heavy anymore. When you live like today could be your last, you don't waste time. You stop procrastinating on the things that matter, because there's no later to rely on. There's just now. It's not about cramming your day full of stuff to do, it's about doing the things that actually matter. You know, the conversations that go deeper than just surface-level small talk. The work that you care about. The people who matter most to you. If today were your last, would you spend it endlessly scrolling on your phone or stressing over something that's out of your control? Probably not. You'd choose what actually makes you feel alive. But here's the real magic of this mindset, it pulls you out of autopilot. So much of life is lived on cruise control, just going through the motions. We get caught up in routines, tasks, and all the little things that don't really matter in the grand scheme. When you think, what if this was it, you wake up. Every conversation feels a little more real. Every decision you make is intentional. You're fully present, and people feel that from you. There's something magnetic about a person who's living with that kind of awareness, with that kind of intensity. And when you start living with that kind of focus, you naturally command more respect. You're not drifting. You're not wasting time or energy on things that don't align with who you are or what you value. People pick up on that. They can sense that you're someone who's living with purpose, someone who doesn't take time for granted. It's hard not to respect someone who approaches life with that kind of clarity and drive. You become someone they prioritize, because your time feels valuable. And you know what? It is. Also, when you live like today could be your last, you let go of a lot of the petty stuff. Grudges, resentments, the little annoyances that normally get under your skin, they don't seem so important anymore. You become quicker to forgive, quicker to focus on what really matters. You stop sweating the small stuff, because why would you waste your last day on that? People respect those who can rise above the trivial and stay focused on the bigger picture. It's not about rushing or cramming your life into one day, it's about living fully, with presence and intention. When you embrace that mindset, you stop letting life happen to you. You start choosing how to spend your time, how to respond to challenges, and how to engage with others. You take control, and that's where the real power lies. Living like today could be your last day reminds you that life isn't infinite. That every moment you have is precious. And when you start treating your time that way, other people will start treating it that way too. Respect follows naturally because you're living with purpose, with urgency, and with a sense of appreciation for the moment you're in. And that's the kind of energy that people can't help but notice. Thanks for watching. If you found these 10 Stoic rules helpful, make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more content like this. Remember, true respect comes from within, and by living with integrity and practicing these timeless principles, you'll naturally command the respect of others. Drop a comment below on which rule resonated with you the most, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. Stay grounded, stay focused, and keep striving to live a life of virtue. See you in the next one.